The Wyoming darkness would have swallowed her whole if the cowboy hadn't come. 19-year-old Violet James lay unconscious beside her luggage on a desolate frontier road, abandoned 5 miles from civilization, vulnerable to wolves, outlaws, and the merciless 1876 winter descending upon the territory. When Caleb Irvine's wagon emerged from the moonlit sage, he found her, a sleeping stranger who would change everything. This is the story of how a midnight rescue became an epic love. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this journey travels. The stagecoach wheels had long since faded into silence, leaving only the whisper of wind through dry sage and the settling cold of a Wyoming October evening. Violet James sat perfectly still on the roadside, her hands folded in her lap with a composure that betrayed none of the terror slowly wrapping itself around her heart, like the approaching darkness. She had been sitting there for 3 hours. The leather travel cases beside her, one large trunk and 2 smaller bags containing everything she owned, seemed to mock her with their presence. At least you have your belongings, she thought bitterly. You'll die well-dressed, and with plenty to read. The stagecoach driver, a grizzled man named Hutchins with tobacco-stained teeth and a perpetual squint, had deposited her on this stretch of road with a casual cruelty that still made her stomach turn. "Stage is overloaded, miss. You'll have to wait here. Someone from Promise Creek will be along shortly to fetch you."
"But it's nearly sunset," she had protested, hating the tremor in her voice. "Surely we can make room." "Company policy, miss. Weight restrictions." He had tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "You'll be fine. This here's a well-traveled road." That had been a lie. In 3 hours, not a single wagon, rider, or soul had passed. The road stretched empty in both directions, a pale ribbon winding through an ocean of sage and sparse grass that rolled away to distant mountains already purple with twilight. Violet pulled her traveling cloak tighter. The wool was good quality, a parting gift from her aunt in Philadelphia, but it had been chosen for autumn in the east, not the bone-deep cold that seemed to rise from the very earth here in the west. Her fingers had lost sensation an hour ago. She was a practical young woman.
Practical enough to have accepted this teaching position despite her father's fury, practical enough to have made the arduous journey alone, practical enough to know that sitting on this road after dark was likely to end in tragedy. The West was full of dangers she could only imagine. Wolves, bears, desperados, renegade Indians, men whose intentions toward a lone woman would be far worse than simple robbery. Yet what choice did she have? To walk 5 miles in darkness with her luggage was impossible. To abandon her belongings, her books, her teaching materials, her mother's cameo brooch, was unthinkable. To set off into the wilderness, hoping to find Promise Creek, would be suicide. So she sat and waited, and tried not to think about the stories she had heard, the warnings that had followed her westward like dark birds. The sun touched the horizon, bleeding red and gold across the vast sky. Violet had never seen such colors in Philadelphia, had never experienced such profound silence. At home, there were always sounds. Carriages on cobblestones, vendors calling their wares, the hum of civilized life. Here, there was only the wind and the occasional cry of a bird she couldn't name. She thought of her mother, dead these 5 years from consumption. Elizabeth James had been a refined woman, a teacher herself, who had believed that education was the surest path to independence for a woman. "Never rely on a man for your survival, Violet," she had said during those final painful months. "Cultivate your mind. It's the one thing no one can take from you." Her father had disagreed violently. Marcus James was a successful shipping merchant who believed a woman's place was in the home, under male protection. When Violet had announced her intention to accept the teaching position in Promise Creek, Wyoming territory, he had exploded with rage. "You'll go west over my dead body. Do you know what happens to young women alone in those godless places? You'll be ruined, murdered, or worse." "I'm 19 years old, Father, old enough to make my own decisions." "You're old enough to be married. Harrison Whitmore has made his intentions clear. A fine match, wealthy, established. Harrison Whitmore is 43 years old and looking for a decorative wife to bear his children and keep his house. I am not interested in being decorative." The argument had escalated from there. In the end, she had left without his blessing,
with only her aunt's support and a trunk full of teaching supplies. Now, sitting on this desolate road as darkness gathered, she wondered if her father had been right. No. She straightened her spine. She refused to give in to despair. She was Elizabeth James's daughter, practical and brave. She would survive this. The stars began emerging, brilliant and cold. Violet had never seen so many.
They crowded the darkening sky in thick rivers of light, beautiful and terrible in their indifference. She found herself narrating the scene in her mind as if she were writing a letter home. Dear Aunt Margaret, the stars in Wyoming are so numerous they seem almost aggressive in their brightness. A sound made her freeze. Not the wind, not a bird. Something moving through the sage, something large and deliberate. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She stood slowly, scanning the darkness. The sound came again, a rustling, snapping of dry branches. Her mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. A bear? A wolf? A man? She looked at her luggage, calculating. Could she leave it? Could she run? The sound grew closer, definitely footsteps, definitely large. Then, emerging from the gloom about 30 yards away, she saw it. A deer, a young buck with small antlers stepping delicately through the sage. It paused, looked directly at her with dark, liquid eyes, then continued on its way, utterly unconcerned. Violet released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her legs trembled so badly she had to sit down again, this time directly on her trunk. She pressed her hands to her face, feeling the sting of tears she refused to shed. Pull yourself together. Crying accomplishes nothing. But exhaustion was catching up with her. The journey from Philadelphia had taken 9 days, train to Chicago, train to Cheyenne, then 3 days of brutal stagecoach travel through terrain that grew increasingly harsh and empty. She had barely slept, eating cold biscuits and dried meat at relay stations that were little more than shacks, surrounded by rough men who stared at her with expressions she tried not to interpret. The temperature was dropping rapidly now. Violet could see her breath. Her feet, in their impractical buttoned boots, felt like blocks of ice. She tried flexing her toes, wiggling her fingers, anything to maintain circulation. Another hour passed. The moon rose, nearly full, casting the landscape in silver and shadow. The road became a pale ghost stretching into infinite darkness. No lights appeared in either direction. Violet's head nodded forward. She jerked it back up, forcing her eyes open. She couldn't sleep. It wasn't safe. She had to stay alert. But exhaustion was a physical weight pressing down on her. 3 nights of fitful sleep, the stress of the journey, the fear of the past hours, it all combined into an irresistible heaviness. Her eyes drifted closed. Just for a moment. Just rest your eyes for a moment. She never felt herself slide sideways, never felt her body settle against the trunk, never knew when her breathing deepened and sleep claimed her completely. Caleb Irvine had been riding since before dawn, and he was bone-tired. The trip to Laramie to purchase breeding stock had taken longer than expected. The seller had been drunk and argumentative. The negotiations had dragged into a second day, and by the time Caleb had finally secured 3 young heifers at a reasonable price, he was already behind schedule. He should have stayed overnight in Laramie, but something pulled him homeward. Maybe it was the changing weather. He could smell snow coming, though it was early yet for serious storms. Maybe it was concern for his ranch. He had left his 2 hired hands, Pete and Tommy, in charge. And while they were good men, neither had his experience or judgment. Or maybe it was simply that the ranch was the only home he had left, and he felt unmoored when away from it too long. So he had set out at dawn, pushing the wagon harder than he should have, the 3 heifers secured in back, his riding horse, a rangy sorrel gelding named Red, tied behind. The road was rough, the wagon protested with every rut, and the heifers bawled their displeasure, but he kept moving. By the time twilight fell, he was still 10 miles from home. He considered stopping, making camp, but the moon was rising full and bright, and the road was clear enough. He could make it home by midnight if he kept going. The landscape around him was familiar and beloved. He had been born not 30 miles from here, had spent his entire 30 years in this territory. His father had been one of the early settlers, arriving in 65 when Caleb was 9, staking a claim and building it into a modest but successful cattle operation. Then 4 years ago, both parents had died within 6 months of each other. His mother from a fever, his father from a combination of grief and a heart that had simply worn out. The ranch had passed to Caleb, the only child, and he had poured everything into maintaining it, improving it, making it worthy of his father's legacy. It was a lonely life, but it was his. He had tried courting a few times over the years. There was a widow in town, Mrs. Hadley, who had made her interest clear, and Sarah Connors, the banker's daughter, who was pretty enough. But nothing had taken root. The widow was bitter and sharp-tongued, and Sarah, while sweet, was looking for a more refined life than a rancher could provide. So he worked, managed the ranch, helped neighbors when needed, and told himself he was content. Most days, he even believed it. The wagon crested a small rise, and in the moonlight, Caleb saw something on the road ahead. He squinted, trying to make sense of the shapes. Luggage? Who would leave luggage sitting in the middle of the... He pulled the wagon to a halt, his hand automatically moving to the rifle secured beside him. In Wyoming Territory in 1876, you learned to be cautious. Too many travelers had stumbled into ambushes. Too many good people had died because they trusted the wrong situation. He scanned the surroundings carefully. The sage stretched empty on all sides. No movement, no sounds beyond the normal night sounds of insects and wind. The luggage sat there, dark shapes in the moonlight, and beside them, his heart lurched. A person. Someone sitting or lying beside the luggage. Caleb secured the reins and climbed down quietly, rifle in hand. He approached slowly, every sense alert. As he drew closer, details emerged. A woman's traveling cloak, dark fabric, the pale shape of a face framed by dark hair. Dead? Injured? Bait for a trap? He stopped 10 feet away and called out, "Ma'am, are you all right?" No response. The figure didn't move. He came closer, rifle still ready, eyes scanning the darkness for threats. Close enough now to see her clearly. A young woman, very pale, slumped against a leather trunk. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow but regular. Asleep. She had fallen asleep on the side of the road. Caleb lowered the rifle, astonishment replacing caution. What in God's name was a young woman doing alone on this road? Where had she come from? Where was she going? He knelt beside her, close enough to see her face properly. She was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 19 or 20. City clothes, good quality. Dark hair pinned up but coming loose. A pretty face, though drawn with exhaustion and cold. "Ma'am," he said again, more gently. "Ma'am, you need to wake up." She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He touched her shoulder carefully. God, she was cold, far too cold, and shook her gently. "Ma'am." Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. Exhaustion had claimed her completely. Caleb rocked back on his heels, thinking. The temperature was dropping fast. Frost would come tonight, he could feel it. She couldn't stay here. She needed warmth, shelter, and she needed it soon. But he couldn't just throw her in the back of the wagon with the heifers. He looked at the wagon bed, considering. There was a space in front where he sometimes slept when camping. If he moved some supplies, he could make room. No, that would take too long, and she was already too cold. The decision made itself. He was a big man, strong from years of ranch work, and she was a small woman, slight and light. He slipped the rifle back into its place on the wagon, then returned and carefully worked his arms under her, one under her knees, one behind her back. She made a small sound as he lifted her but didn't wake. Up close, he could see how young she really was, see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her lips were faintly blue with cold. He carried her to the wagon and settled her as gently as possible on the bench seat. She sagged against the side, and he quickly stripped off his coat, sheepskin-lined, warm, and wrapped it around her. It swallowed her small frame, but it would keep her warmer than that thin traveling cloak. The luggage. He couldn't leave it. Whatever had brought her here, those cases clearly contained everything she owned. He loaded them quickly, one large trunk, surprisingly heavy, and two smaller bags. They filled most of the wagon bed, but there was still room for the heifers. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. She was already slumping toward him, and he shifted position slightly so she could lean against his shoulder. Better that than have her fall off the seat. The wagon moved forward, and Caleb found himself acutely aware of the small, cold weight pressed against his side. Who was she? What was her story? The questions multiplied as the miles passed. An hour later, the lights of Promise Creek appeared in the distance. Perhaps a dozen buildings clustered around a crossroads, warm yellow light spilling from windows. It wasn't much. General store, saloon, boarding house, church, bank, blacksmith, and a scattering of homes. But it was civilization, and it was exactly what this young woman needed. As they entered the town's single street, Caleb headed directly for Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. If anyone could help, it was Agnes Peterson, a formidable woman who ran the cleanest, most respectable establishment in Promise Creek. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the two-story frame building and climbed down carefully, trying not to disturb his passenger. But the cessation of movement brought her partially awake. Her eyes opened, unfocused and confused. "Where—" "You're safe, ma'am. We're in Promise Creek. I'm taking you to the boarding house." She blinked up at him, and he saw the moment true consciousness returned. Fear flooded her face, and she jerked away from him, nearly falling off the wagon seat. "Don't! Who are you?" "Easy." He held up his hand, stepping back. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Caleb Irvine. I found you on the road about 10 miles back. You were asleep and it was getting cold, so I brought you to town." She stared at him, breathing hard, clearly trying to assess the situation. Her eyes went to the boarding house, then back to him, then to her luggage visible in the wagon bed. The fear in her face began to ease, replaced by confusion, and then gradually, comprehension. "I fell asleep?" "Yes, ma'am. Dead asleep against your trunk." Her face flushed, even in the dim light. "Oh, God, I didn't mean to. I was trying to stay awake. I was watching for... I was supposed to..." She pressed her hands to her face. "This is mortifying." Despite everything, Caleb found himself suppressing a smile. "I'd say it's more dangerous than mortifying, ma'am. That's not a good road to sleep beside." "I know that." Her voice was sharp, defensive. "I wasn't given much choice. The stagecoach left me there. The driver said someone from town would come, but no one..." She stopped, seemed to collect herself. "I apologize. You rescued me, and I'm being rude. Thank you, Mr. Irvine. I'm very grateful." Before he could respond, the boarding house door opened and Agnes Peterson emerged, lamp held high. She was a stout woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Caleb Irvine, is that you? What's all this commotion at this hour?" "Evening, Mrs. Peterson. I found this young lady stranded on the road. Thought you might have a room for her." Agnes came down the steps, holding the lamp higher to illuminate Violet's face. Recognition dawned. "Lord have mercy, you must be the new school teacher. Miss James, isn't it? We've been expecting you since this afternoon. When you didn't arrive, we thought, well, never mind what we thought. Come inside at once, child. You look half frozen." Violet climbed down from the wagon, stumbling slightly. Caleb reached out to steady her, and she accepted his arm with a murmured thanks. "The school board will hear about this," Agnes continued, her voice rising with indignation. "Leaving a young woman alone on that road. Hutchins should be horsewhipped. Come on, dear, let's get you warm and fed." "My luggage," Violet began. "I'll bring it in," Caleb said. "You go on inside." She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. In the lamplight, he could see her more clearly. Dark brown eyes, intelligent and direct, a face that was striking rather than conventionally pretty, an air of determination beneath the exhaustion. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Truly, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Nothing good, I expect. You're lucky the temperature didn't drop faster." Luck had nothing to do with it," Agnes interjected. "Providence sent Caleb down that road at exactly the right moment. Now come along, Miss James, before you catch your death." Violet allowed herself to be shepherded inside. Caleb began unloading her trunk, surprised again by its weight. Books, he guessed. What else would a schoolteacher carry? By the time he had wrestled all three pieces inside, Agnes directing him to a room on the second floor, Violet was seated by the fire in the boarding house's common room, wrapped in blankets and clutching a cup of something hot. Her color was better, though she still looked exhausted. Agnes was bustling about, bringing more blankets, stoking the fire, preparing a plate of cold chicken and bread. Other boarders had emerged to see what the fuss was about. An elderly couple, the Harrisons, a young cowhand named Billy, and Mrs. Henderson, a widow who helped Agnes with the housework. Set those cases in her room, Caleb, Agnes instructed. Second door on the right. He carried the trunk upstairs, placed it carefully in a neat, simple room with a bed, dresser, and washstand. The two smaller bags fit beside it. When he came back downstairs, Violet was eating mechanically, clearly too tired to taste the food. "I should settle up with you," she said, looking up as he approached. "For the rescue. Whatever the usual rate is, there's no rate for helping someone in trouble, Miss James." "But surely your time, your effort." "Ma'am, I was heading this direction anyway. It was no trouble to bring you along." Agnes nodded approvingly. "That's Caleb, salt of the earth. His father was the same way, always the first to help a neighbor." Violet studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I'll simply say thank you again, Mr. Irvine. You may have saved my life tonight." "Just glad I came along when I did." He picked up his hat, which he'd set on a side table. "I should be getting home. My hands will wonder what happened to me." "Of course." She stood, swaying slightly. Agnes rushed to steady her. "Safe travels, Mr. Irvine." He nodded to the room in general and headed for the door. Outside, the night air was crisp and cold, and his wagon waited where he'd left it, the heifers shifting restlessly in back. He climbed up, gathered the reins, and paused for a moment, looking back at the boarding house. Through the window, he could see Violet James by the fire, Agnes fussing over her, the new school teacher. Promise Creek had been waiting for a teacher for nearly a year, ever since old Mr. Thornton had died. The town's children had been running half wild, and the school board, such as it was, had finally scraped together enough money to hire someone. They'd expected a man, Caleb knew, or a much older woman. Not this slip of a girl from the east who had somehow ended up asleep beside her luggage on a dark Wyoming road. He shook his head, released the brake, and urged the team forward. The ranch was still 5 miles away, and morning would come early, whether he was ready or not. Violet woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and a moment of complete disorientation. Where? Memory returned in a rush, the road, the cold, falling asleep, waking to find herself in a wagon beside a stranger. Heat flooded her face. She had spent hours lecturing herself on staying alert, on being careful, on not becoming another cautionary tale of a foolish Eastern girl who thought she could handle the West. And then she had fallen asleep on the side of a road like a child who couldn't stay awake past bedtime. She sat up, wincing at her stiff muscles. The room was small but clean, her trunk and bags stacked neatly against one wall. Someone, Mrs. Peterson presumably, had removed her boots and loosened her dress but left her otherwise clothed, thoughtful and proper. A pitcher of water sat on the washstand, and Violet poured some into the basin, splashing her face. The water was cold enough to make her gasp, but it cleared the fog from her mind. Today was October 15th, 1876. She was in Promise Creek, Wyoming territory. She was here to teach, and she needed to present herself as a competent professional educator, not a helpless Eastern girl who needed rescuing. The thought of Caleb Irvine made her pause, hands still wet, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. He had been unexpected. She had been raised on stories of rough Western men, crude, violent, motivated primarily by base instincts. Mr. Irvine had been none of those things. He had been gentle, respectful. He had covered her with his coat, brought her safely to town, refused payment, and left without expecting thanks or acknowledgement. His hands, when he'd steadied her as she climbed down from the wagon, had been careful and brief. She found herself hoping she would have the chance to thank him properly, perhaps when she was less exhausted and more coherent. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss James, are you awake, dear?" "Yes, Mrs. Peterson. Please, come in." Agnes entered with a tray containing coffee, eggs, toast, and what looked like fried potatoes. "I thought you might prefer to eat in your room this morning. You were so tired last night." "You're very kind." Violet accepted the tray gratefully. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a hot breakfast. "Mrs. Peterson, I should ask about arrangements. The school board mentioned lodging would be provided, but this is your lodging, dear. The board is paying for your room here. It's all arranged. You'll have breakfast and dinner included, and I pack lunches for working folks, so I'll do the same for you. $1 a week, paid by the board, so you don't need to worry about that." Relief washed through Violet. She had been budgeting carefully, worried about how far her small savings would stretch. That's wonderful, thank you. Agnes settled into the room's single chair, clearly prepared for a chat. Now tell me about yourself, dear. Philadelphia, isn't it? That's a long way to come. Over breakfast, Violet found herself telling an edited version of her story. Her mother's death, her decision to teach, the conflict with her father, the long journey west. Agnes listened with shrewd, kind eyes, asking occasional questions. And your father? He didn't approve? No. He wanted me to marry a man I didn't love and settle into the life he'd planned for me. I wanted something different. Good for you. Agnes nodded firmly. Too many young women let themselves be pushed into situations that make them miserable. Teaching is honorable work, and Lord knows Promise Creek needs you. The children have been running absolutely wild since Mr. Thornton died. How many students should I expect? Oh, between 15 and 20 depending on the season. More in winter when the ranch children can be spared. Less in summer when everyone's needed for work. Ages 5 to 15, though some of the older boys are, well, you'll see. Some are bigger than you are and not always inclined to listen to a female teacher. Violet lifted her chin. I'll manage. Agnes smiled. I believe you will. You've got spine, I can see that. The school is just down the street. You can see it from your window, actually. She pointed and Violet saw a small white building with a bell tower. Needs some fixing up, I'll warn you. The roof leaks in one corner, the stove is temperamental, and the desks are in rough shape. The school board has funds for supplies, but not much else. I'll make do. Violet had known she wasn't coming to a pristine Eastern schoolroom. When am I expected to start? Monday. That gives you today and tomorrow to settle in, review your materials, meet some of the parents. The Reverend Collins, he's on the school board, wants to meet with you this afternoon at 2 o'clock. He'll show you the school and introduce you to the other board members. Perfect. That gives me time to unpack and prepare. Agnes stood. I'll leave you to it then. If you need anything, just come downstairs and holler. And Miss James, we're very glad you're here. The children need you, and frankly, this town needs more civilized female influence. After Agnes left, Violet finished her breakfast and began the process of unpacking. Her trunk contained mostly books, primers, arithmetic texts, readers, her own personal collection including Dickens, Shakespeare, and Emerson. The smaller bags held clothes, personal items, and teaching materials, slate boards, chalk, paper, pens, ink. She hung her 3 dresses in the small wardrobe, arranged her books on the dresser top, and set up the small photograph she had of her mother. Elizabeth James looked back at her from the fading image, intelligent eyes calm and steady. I made it, Mama, Violet whispered. I'm here, and I'm going to make you proud. At precisely 2 o'clock, dressed in her most professional dark blue dress with her hair pinned severely back, Violet walked down the boarding house stairs and found Reverend Collins waiting in the common room. He was a tall, thin man in his 60s with white hair and gentle eyes. Miss James, welcome to Promise Creek. We're delighted to have you. Shall we walk to the school? The October afternoon was bright and cool, the sky that impossible blue she was beginning to associate with Wyoming. Promise Creek looked different in daylight, smaller, rougher, but somehow more real than it had seemed in last night's lamplight and confusion. The school was indeed visible from the boarding house, just 50 yards down the dusty main street. As they approached, Violet noted the peeling paint, the slightly crooked bell tower, the windows that could use washing. Inside was worse. The single large room held perhaps 20 desks in various states of disrepair, a pot-bellied stove that listed slightly to one side, a teacher's desk that wobbled when Reverend Collins touched it, and a blackboard that was more gray than black. But there were books, a small shelf of them, and maps on the walls and windows that, though dirty, let in plenty of light. It was shabby, but it was workable. I know it's not what you're accustomed to, Reverend Collins said apologetically. It's fine, Reverend. A school is made by its teacher and students, not its furnishings. He smiled, clearly relieved. You'll have 16 students initially. I've prepared a list with names and ages. The parents are required to provide whatever supplies they can, slates, primers if they have them. You'll need to assess each child's level individually, of course. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, school hours, 8 to 3 with an hour for lunch, curriculum expectations, reading, writing, arithmetic, some history and geography, discipline policies. She would have full authority, though corporal punishment should be used sparingly, and the peculiar challenges of a frontier school where students might miss weeks during harvest or when family emergencies arose. 2 other school board members arrived, Mr. Henderson, who owned the general store, and Mr. Patterson, a rancher. Both were pleased to meet her, though she caught something skeptical in their eyes. She was young, female, and clearly from the East. They were reserving judgment. "We heard you had some trouble on the journey," Mr. Henderson said. "That fool Hutchins left you on the road." "I was rescued by a Mr. Irvine," Violet said carefully. "He brought me safely to Mrs. Peterson's." "Caleb Irvine?" Mr. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Good man, Caleb. Best rancher in the county after his father passed. Keeps to himself mostly, but he'll help anyone who needs it." "He was very kind," Violet agreed. "We'll be speaking to the stage company about Hutchins," Reverend Collins said firmly. "That was unacceptable. You could have been seriously hurt." Violet wanted to say that she had been seriously frightened, that she had spent hours convinced she would die on that road, that she had never felt so alone or helpless. But that wouldn't establish her as the competent professional she needed to be, so she simply nodded and said, "I appreciate your concern." By the time she returned to the boarding house, the sun was setting and her head was swimming with information. She had a list of students, a key to the school, and a slightly better sense of what she had gotten herself into. Agnes had dinner waiting, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, thick bread, and apple pie. The other boarders joined them at the large dining table, the elderly Harrisons, who were friendly and curious, young Billy, the cowhand, who was painfully shy, and Mrs. Henderson, who immediately began offering advice about handling unruly students. "My nephew James is one of yours," Mrs. Henderson said. "Bright boy, but full of mischief. Don't let him intimidate you." "I won't," Violet assured her. After dinner, exhausted but satisfied, she climbed the stairs to her room. Through her window, she could see the darkening street, the school building sitting quiet and waiting, and beyond it, the vast rolling landscape that stretched to mountains she couldn't quite see in the gathering darkness. This was her home now. This raw, rough little town. These people who were giving her a chance. She thought of Caleb Irvine, out on his ranch somewhere in that vast darkness, and found herself wondering if she would see him again. Promise Creek was small. Surely their paths would cross. But that was foolish thinking. He had rescued her out of simple human decency, nothing more. She was here to teach, to prove herself, to build a life on her own terms. Violet unpinned her hair, brushed it out, and prepared for bed. Through the thin walls, she could hear Agnes moving around downstairs, hear the Harrisons talking quietly in their room, hear the ordinary sounds of life in this strange new place. She was not on that dark road anymore, cold and frightened and alone. She was here, safe, with a purpose and a chance. Tomorrow she would begin preparing in earnest. Monday, she would meet her students. And somehow, someway, she would make this work. She had crossed a continent to get here. She had survived abandonment and rescue. She could certainly handle teaching 16 frontier children. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of a tall cowboy with kind eyes and careful hands, disappearing into the darkness with a wagon full of cattle, and she sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the stranger who had become, however briefly, her salvation. Monday morning arrived with a crystalline clarity that made Violet's stomach tighten with nerves. She had spent the entire weekend preparing, reviewing her materials, arranging the classroom, scrubbing desks until her hands were raw. But now, standing before the schoolhouse door at 7:30 in the morning, she felt wholly unprepared for what waited inside. The students began arriving at 7:45. They came on foot, on horseback, in wagons driven by parents who eyed Violet with expressions ranging from hopeful to dubious. The children themselves were a revelation, rough-clothed, weather-browned, with eyes that held a wariness she had never seen in Philadelphia's schoolchildren. A boy of perhaps 14, tall and rangy with sun-bleached hair, was the first to speak. "You the new teacher?" "I am, Miss James, and you are." "Luke Patterson." He looked her up and down with an insolence that set her teeth on edge. "You don't look like much." "Appearances can be deceiving, Mr. Patterson. Please take a seat." He smirked but complied. The other students filed in, some curious, some hostile, some simply resigned. By 8 o'clock, 17 children, ranging from a tiny 5-year-old girl named Emma to several boys who were nearly men, filled the room with shuffling, whispering chaos. Violet stood before them and let the silence build until every eye was on her. "Good morning. I am Miss James, and I am here to teach you. I know you've been without a teacher for some time, and I know some of you may doubt whether a woman from Philadelphia can handle a Wyoming schoolroom." She paused, meeting Luke Patterson's eyes directly. "I can. I will. And by the end of this year, every one of you will be able to read, write, and calculate better than you do today." A small girl in the front row raised her hand tentatively. "Yes?" "Miss James, can you really teach us like Mr. Thornton did? He knew everything." "I don't know everything," Violet said honestly, "but I know enough to teach you what you need to learn. And when I don't know something, I'll admit it, and we'll find the answer together." The morning passed in a blur of assessment. She had each child read aloud, work simple arithmetic problems on the board, write their names. The range of ability was staggering. Emma, the 5-year-old, didn't know her letters. Luke Patterson, despite his attitude, could read at a level appropriate for his age. Several of the middle children, ages 8 to 12, could barely write their own names. At noon, the children scattered like startled birds, most running home for lunch. Violet sat at her desk, overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. How could she possibly meet such varied needs with no assistance and minimal materials? "Miss James?" A voice from the doorway startled her. A woman in her 30s stood there, holding a basket. "I'm Sarah Patterson, Luke's mother. I wanted to apologize for my son's rudeness this morning." "He wasn't the rudest student I've ever encountered," Violet said diplomatically. Sarah smiled wryly. "That's kind of you. Luke's father died 2 years ago, and the boy thinks he's a man now. He doesn't take well to female authority." She set the basket on the desk. "I brought you some lunch. Thought you might not have had time to prepare anything." Inside the basket were sandwiches, apples, and fresh cookies. Violet's eyes stung unexpectedly. "Mrs. Patterson, that's incredibly thoughtful. Thank you." "We're glad you're here, Miss James. Don't let the rough edges fool you. These children need what you have to offer. They just might not know it yet." The afternoon was devoted to establishing routines and rules. Violet laid out her expectations clearly: respect for the teacher and fellow students, completion of assigned work, no fighting or foul language. Consequences for breaking rules would be fair, but firm. "What if we don't follow your rules?" Luke asked, challenge in his voice. "Then you'll discover I have a great deal of patience for honest mistakes and absolutely none for deliberate defiance," Violet replied evenly. "I suggest we all prefer the former." By 3 o'clock, when she dismissed the class, Violet was exhausted but cautiously optimistic. The children had tested her boundaries, of course they had, but she had held firm without losing her temper or resorting to harsh punishment. Several of the younger children had warmed to her. The older boys remained skeptical, but that was to be expected. The pattern continued through the week. Each day brought small victories and small frustrations. Emma began learning her letters with a joy that made Violet's heart swell. A boy named Samuel, who had seemed sullen and slow, revealed a remarkable aptitude for arithmetic once Violet took the time to explain concepts he had missed. Luke Patterson remained a thorn in her side, testing her constantly, but even he began grudgingly completing his assignments. By Friday afternoon, Violet felt she had earned a small measure of respect. The children no longer whispered and giggled when she turned her back. Most of them were completing their work. The schoolhouse felt less like a battlefield and more like an actual place of learning. She was locking the schoolhouse door, her arms full of papers to grade over the weekend, when she heard a familiar voice. "Miss James?" She turned to find Caleb Irvine standing beside a wagon, hat in hand. Her heart did an unexpected skip. She hadn't seen him since that first night, though she had thought of him often, usually with gratitude, sometimes with curiosity about the quiet cowboy who had rescued her. "Mr. Irvine, this is a surprise." "I hope I'm not intruding. I was in town for supplies and thought I'd check on how you're settling in." "That's very kind." She shifted her papers awkwardly. "I'm settling well, thank you. The teaching is challenging but rewarding." He smiled, and she noticed for the first time how it transformed his face, softening the weathered lines and revealing a warmth that hadn't been visible in the darkness of their first meeting. "I heard you had some trouble with Luke Patterson." News travels fast in a small town. That it does. Luke's not a bad kid, just angry about losing his father. He'll come around if you're patient. I intend to be. She paused, then added, "Mr. Irvine, I never properly thanked you for rescuing me. I was exhausted and frightened, and you were extraordinarily kind." "No thanks necessary, Miss James. Anyone would have done the same." "I'm not sure that's true, but I appreciate the modesty." A gust of wind caught her papers, and she clutched them tighter. "I should get these back to the boarding house before they blow away." "Let me help." He stepped forward, taking half the stack before she could protest. "I'll walk you back." They fell into step together, moving down the dusty street in the late afternoon light. Promise Creek was quiet at this hour, most people either working or preparing for supper. Violet found herself acutely aware of Caleb's presence beside her, his height, the easy way he moved, the respectful distance he maintained. "How are you finding Wyoming territory, Shab?" he asked. "Vast, beautiful in a way I didn't expect. Harsher than Philadelphia, certainly, but there's something honest about it." "That's a good word for it. Honest. The land doesn't lie to you. If you're willing to work hard and smart, you can make a life here. If you're lazy or foolish, it'll break you." "Which are you, Mr. Irvine? Hardworking or smart?" He laughed, a low, genuine sound. "I try to be both. My father taught me that ranching requires equal parts labor and judgment. You can't just outwork problems. You have to outthink them too." "Your father passed away, I understand. I'm sorry." 4 years ago now, sometimes feels like yesterday, sometimes feels like a lifetime. They reached the boarding house steps. "He would have liked you, I think. He respected people who took risks to build something meaningful." "Is that what you think I'm doing? Taking a risk?" "Aren't you? Coming west alone? Teaching in a frontier school?" "That takes courage, Miss James." She looked at him directly then, meeting his gray-blue eyes. "Or desperation. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Maybe it's both. Maybe that's what makes it brave." Before she could respond, Agnes appeared in the doorway. "Caleb Irvine, are you keeping Miss James standing in the cold? Come inside, both of you. I just made coffee." "I should get back to the ranch, Mrs. Peterson. Just wanted to check on Miss James." "Nonsense. You've driven all this way. You can spare 10 minutes for coffee." Agnes's tone brooked no argument. Inside, the boarding house was warm and fragrant with cooking smells. Agnes poured coffee while Violet and Caleb settled at the common room table. Mrs. Henderson joined them, eager for gossip, and soon the conversation turned to town news. Who was courting whom? Whose crops had done well? The upcoming church social. Violet found herself relaxing, enjoying the easy camaraderie. Caleb contributed little but listened attentively, occasionally offering a quiet observation that revealed how closely he paid attention to the world around him. She noticed how Agnes and Mrs. Henderson treated him with genuine affection and respect, how they asked after his ranch hands and his cattle with real interest. When he finally rose to leave, Agnes packed him a basket of food despite his protests. "You live on your own, Caleb. Someone needs to make sure you eat properly." "My hands cook, Mrs. Peterson." "Your hands cook beans and bacon. That's not proper nutrition." She thrust the basket into his arms. "Don't argue with me." He accepted with good grace, then turned to Violet. "Miss James, I should mention the schoolhouse stove. Pete, one of my hands, is good with metalwork. If you're having trouble with it, I could send him into town to take a look." "The stove is temperamental," Violet admitted. "It smokes something terrible, and half the time I can't get it hot enough to warm the room properly." "I'll send Pete by tomorrow afternoon. He'll get it working right." "That's very generous, but I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. The children need a warm schoolhouse come winter." After he left, Agnes smiled knowingly at Violet. "That man is interested in you. Don't be ridiculous. He's just being neighborly." Caleb Irvine checks the schoolhouse stove, offers his hand services without being asked? That's not neighborly, dear. That's courting. He's doing no such thing, but Violet felt her cheeks warm. Mrs. Henderson nodded sagely. "Agnes is right. I've known Caleb since he was a boy. He's never once paid special attention to any woman in town, until now." You're both imagining things. He rescued me, felt responsible, and now he's simply being kind. There's nothing more to it." But that night, lying in bed with moonlight streaming through her window, Violet replayed the conversation. The way he had smiled, the way he had called her brave, the way he had noticed the stove problem without her mentioning it. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You came here to teach, not to become one of those women who loses her head over the first kind man she meets. You have work to do, a purpose to fulfill." Still, when sleep came, she dreamed of gray-blue eyes and quiet strength, of being lifted gently into a wagon under stars too numerous to count. Saturday brought Pete, a grizzled man in his 50s who arrived at the schoolhouse with a box of tools and a cheerful demeanor. "Boss sent me to fix your stove, miss." "That's very kind. I'm afraid I don't know much about stoves." "Don't need to, miss. That's what folks like me are for." He set to work, whistling tunelessly, while Violet graded papers at her desk. Within 2 hours, he had the stove drawing properly, the smoke issue resolved, and the whole contraption heating more evenly. "Should work fine now, miss. Just make sure you clean the flue once a month, and don't let the fire get too hot. That's what warps the metal." "I can't thank you enough. What do I owe you?" "Not a thing. Boss already paid me." He tipped his hat and left before she could protest further. Sunday morning, Violet attended church for the first time. A simple white building with wooden pews and windows that rattled in the wind. Reverend Collins preached about community and service, and Violet found herself moved despite the rough setting. Afterward, families gathered outside, and several parents approached to thank her for her work with their children. "Samuel actually wants to come to school now," one mother said, eyes bright with gratitude. "He never wanted to come before." A rancher named Tom Butler clapped her shoulder with casual familiarity that would have been shocking in Philadelphia. "My daughter Mary says you're a real teacher, not like some we've had. Says you actually explain things instead of just expecting them to know." The praise warmed her more than she expected. These people had taken a chance on her, and she was beginning to prove worthy of their trust. She was chatting with Sarah Patterson when she saw Caleb arrive, dressed in clean work clothes and a jacket. He spotted her, nodded a greeting, and headed inside. Her heart did that unexpected skip again. "He comes to church most Sundays," Sarah said quietly, following Violet's gaze. "Not as social as some, but he's a good man. His faith is quiet but real." I was just..." Sarah smiled. "It's all right, Miss James. Half the unmarried women in 3 counties have tried to catch Caleb Irvine's attention. If you're the one who succeeds, more power to you." After the service, as people dispersed, Caleb approached. "Miss James, how's the stove working?" "Perfectly. Pete is a magician. Please thank him again for me." "I will." He hesitated, then said, "I wonder if I might ask a favor." "Of course." "My hands, Pete and Tommy, they never learned to read properly. I've been teaching them myself, but I'm not much of a teacher. I was wondering if you might have primers or materials I could borrow. I'd pay for them naturally." Violet's estimation of him rose another notch. "Mr. Irvine, I have several primers, and you're welcome to borrow them free of charge. Teaching your hands to read is admirable." "They want to learn. Pete especially. He has grandchildren back east, and they write to him, but he can't read the letters without help. It embarrasses him." "Come by the schoolhouse Monday after class. I'll gather materials for you." "I appreciate it, Miss James." Monday afternoon, Caleb arrived as promised. Violet had selected 3 primers of varying difficulty, plus a basic arithmetic text and a reader with simple stories. "Start with the most basic primer," she advised. "Have them practice writing letters, then simple words. The key is consistency. Even 15 minutes a day will make a difference." He took the books carefully, as if they were precious. "Thank you. This means a lot to them. If they have questions, or if you'd like advice on teaching methods, you're welcome to ask. I'm always at the school until 4 o'clock. I might take you up on that." He paused at the door. "Miss James, there's a church social this Saturday evening. Potluck dinner, some music. I wondered if you might like to attend, as friends," he added quickly. "I know you're new to town, and it's a good chance to meet more people." Her pulse quickened. "That sounds lovely. Yes, I'd like to attend. I could pick you up at 6, if that suits." "That would be perfect." After he left, she stood in the empty schoolhouse, books scattered across her desk, and realized she was smiling. Just friends, he had said, but something in his eyes suggested the possibility of more, given time. The week passed in a pleasant blur of teaching and preparation. Violet found her rhythm with the students, pushing them when they needed pushing, encouraging when they needed encouragement, disciplining firmly but fairly when necessary. Even Luke Patterson was slowly warming to her, though he'd die before admitting it. Saturday evening arrived cool and clear. Violet dressed in her best dress, a deep green wool that brought out her eyes, and pinned her hair in a softer style than her usual severe bun. Agnes fussed over her like a mother hen. "You look beautiful, dear. Caleb won't know what hit him." "It's not like that, Agnes." "Of course not." Agnes's tone was pure innocence. When Caleb arrived promptly at 6, Violet saw his eyes widen slightly at her appearance. "You look very nice, Miss James." "Thank you. So do you." He had clearly made an effort. Clean shirt, pressed trousers, hair still damp from washing. The church social was held in the town's largest building, actually a barn owned by the Hendersons that served for community gatherings. Inside, lanterns provided warm light, tables groaned with food, and someone was playing a fiddle in the corner. The space was crowded with townspeople Violet recognized from church and from students' parents. Caleb guided her through introductions, to families she hadn't met, to other ranchers, to the banker Mr. Connors and his daughter Sarah, a pretty blonde girl who eyed Violet with barely concealed jealousy. "Miss James," Sarah said with sugary sweetness, "how brave of you to come all this way to teach. I could never be so adventurous." "It's not really adventure," Violet replied evenly. "It's work I'm qualified for and called to do. Still, to leave civilization for this rough place, you must miss Philadelphia terribly." "I miss some things, but I'm finding much to appreciate here." They filled plates with fried chicken, potato salad, biscuits, and pie, finding seats at a long table with the Pattersons and several other families. The conversation flowed easily, talk of weather, cattle prices, the upcoming winter, funny stories about children and animals. Violet found herself laughing genuinely for the first time since arriving in Wyoming. These people were rough-edged but warm-hearted, their humor earthy but never cruel. She felt herself relaxing in a way she never had at Philadelphia's formal social gatherings. After dinner, the fiddle player was joined by a guitar, and people began dancing, simple reels and square dances that Violet didn't know. Caleb noticed her watching wistfully. "Would you like to learn?" "I don't want to embarrass myself." "Everyone's terrible when they start. Come on, I'll teach you." He led her to the dancing area and walked her through the basic steps of a simple reel. He was patient and surprisingly graceful for such a large man, and soon she was laughing and spinning with the other dancers, her hand warm in his, the music and movement driving away any lingering shyness. They danced 3 dances before taking a break, both flushed and breathless. Outside, the air was cool and welcome after the crowded barn's warmth. They walked a short distance from the noise, and Violet looked up at the stars, brilliant and infinite as always. "I'm beginning to understand why people love this place," she said quietly. "It's beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with comfort or convenience." "It gets in your blood," Caleb agreed. "I've been to Denver a few times, thought about what life might be like in a real city, but I can't imagine leaving. This is home." "You've never wanted to see more of the world?" "Maybe someday. But not to leave, just to visit and then come back. What about you? Do you see yourself staying in Promise Creek long term?" She considered. "I don't know. I came here to prove something, to myself, to my father, maybe to my mother's memory. Whether I stay depends on whether I succeed." "You're already succeeding, Miss James. The children adore you." "Some of them. Luke Patterson still looks at me like I'm a particularly annoying insect." Caleb laughed. "Give him time. He'll come around." They stood in comfortable silence, the music drifting from the barn, the night vast and peaceful around them. Violet felt something shift inside her, a recognition that this place, these people, even this quiet man beside her, were becoming important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. "Mr. Irvine?" "Caleb, please. We've danced together. I think we can use first names." "Caleb," she amended, liking the feel of his name. Thank you for bringing me tonight. I've had a wonderful time. So have I, Violet. He said her name carefully, as if testing its weight. I wonder if you'd let me take you riding sometime. There's a valley about 3 miles from here, beautiful this time of year. I think you'd enjoy seeing it. Her breath caught. This was more than friendly interest. This was courtship, real and intentional. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain professional distance, to focus solely on teaching, but a larger part wanted to say yes, wanted to explore whatever this connection might be. I should warn you, I've never been on a horse in my life. I'll teach you. I'm patient, and I have a gentle mare that's perfect for beginners. Then yes, I'd like that very much. His smile in the moonlight was worth every moment of uncertainty. Next Sunday afternoon after church? If the weather holds? Perfect. They returned to the barn, and the evening continued with more dancing, more conversation, more laughter. When Caleb drove her back to the boarding house at 10 o'clock, Violet felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. At her door, he helped her down from the wagon with careful hands. Thank you for tonight, Violet. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed an evening so much. Neither can I. Thank you for asking me. He hesitated, then said, I should be honest with you. I'm not good with words like some men. I can't quote poetry or talk about philosophy. I'm just a rancher who works hard and tries to do right. Those are excellent qualities, Caleb, better than poetry in my opinion. What I'm trying to say is, I'd like to spend more time with you, get to know you properly, if that's something you'd be open to. Her heart swelled. I'd like that too. He smiled, tipped his hat, and climbed back into the wagon. She watched until the vehicle disappeared into the darkness, then went inside where Agnes was waiting with undisguised curiosity. Well? It was lovely. He's taking me riding next Sunday. Agnes clapped her hands together. I knew it. I told you he was courting you. You were right, Violet admitted, though I still can't quite believe it. Why not? You're intelligent, beautiful, brave. Why wouldn't a good man be interested? Because I'm a teacher. Because I have ambitions beyond marriage. Because I don't want to be someone's property. Caleb Irvine doesn't want property, dear. He wants a partner. There's a difference. His mother was one of the strongest women I ever knew. She ran that ranch right alongside her husband, and he valued her judgment on everything. That's how Caleb was raised. He won't want a simpering wife. That night, Violet lay awake thinking. Her plan had been so clear. Come west, teach, prove her independence, build a life on her own terms. Romance, if it came at all, would be far in the future with someone who understood and supported her vocation. But Caleb had appeared unexpectedly, and everything felt different. He didn't seem threatened by her education or her work. He treated her as an equal, not a decoration. When he looked at her, she saw respect alongside the growing affection. Was it possible to have both? To teach and to love? To build a life that included partnership without sacrificing independence? She didn't know. But she found herself wanting to find out. The next week brought the first real cold snap. Frost every morning, breath visible in the air, students arriving bundled in whatever warm clothes their families could provide. The repaired stove worked beautifully, keeping the schoolhouse warm enough for learning. Thursday afternoon, as Violet was preparing to dismiss class, Luke Patterson approached her desk. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Miss James, I wanted to, that is, I should... He stopped, frustrated. Yes, Luke? I was rude to you when you first came, and I've been difficult all month. I'm sorry. The apology clearly cost him. Violet kept her expression neutral. I appreciate that, Luke. What changed your mind? My ma says you're a good teacher, and I guess, well, I've learned more this month than I did in 6 months with Mr. Thornton. Not that he wasn't good, Luke added hastily, but you explain things better, make them make sense. Thank you. That means a great deal to me. Also, Caleb Irvine says you're all right, and Caleb doesn't give his approval lightly. Violet's eyebrows rose. You know Mr. Irvine? He was friends with my pa. He's been helping Ma with ranch decisions since Pa died. He's a good man. He seems to be. Ma says he's sweet on you. She thinks it's good, says you'd be good for him.
Violet felt her cheeks warm. Your mother talks too much. Luke grinned, suddenly looking like the boy he still was under the man's exterior. That she does, Miss James. That she does. After he left, Violet sat at her desk, papers forgotten. The whole town was watching this courtship develop, apparently. The thought should have been embarrassing, but instead she found it oddly comforting. These people cared about Caleb, wanted good things for him. If they approved of her, perhaps she wasn't so out of place here after all. Sunday arrived clear and cold, perfect riding weather according to Agnes. After church, Caleb drove her to his ranch, a sprawling operation with a sturdy house, large barn, corrals holding dozens of cattle, and the vast Wyoming landscape rolling away in every direction. It's impressive, Violet said honestly. It's home. My father built most of it with his own hands. I'm just trying to maintain his vision and maybe expand a little. He helped her down. Come meet the horse I thought you might ride. In the barn, a pretty chestnut mare with a white star on her forehead regarded them calmly from a stall. This is Rosie. She's 15 years old, gentle as a lamb, and she's taught half the children in this county to ride. Violet reached out tentatively and stroked the mare's soft nose. Rosie woofed gently against her hand. She likes you. That's a good sign. The next hour was spent learning the basics, how to approach a horse, how to saddle and bridle, how to mount and dismount. Caleb was patient and thorough, never making her feel foolish for her ignorance. When she finally sat in the saddle, high above the ground and feeling wildly unbalanced, he grinned up at her. You're a natural. I'm terrified. That's natural too. But Rosie will take care of you. Trust her. They started in the corral, Caleb leading Rosie in slow circles while Violet learned to feel the horse's movement, to move with it instead of against it. Gradually she began to relax, to enjoy the rhythm and the sense of partnership with this large, gentle animal. After an hour, Caleb mounted his own horse, the tall sorrel gelding named Red, and they ventured out of the corral, moving at a sedate walk across open land. The world looked different from horseback. Bigger somehow, the horizons more distant, the sky more vast. True to his word, Caleb led her to a valley where golden aspens shimmered in the afternoon light, where a small creek burbled over smooth stones, where the mountains seemed close enough to touch. It was breathtaking. They dismounted and sat on a sun-warmed boulder, the horses grazing nearby. The silence was comfortable, punctuated only by natural sounds, wind, water, birdsong. My mother loved this place, Caleb said quietly. She'd come here when she needed to think or when the ranch work got overwhelming. Said it reminded her why they'd come west in the first place. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with me. Violet, I want to be honest about something. He turned to face her. I'm 30 years old. Most men my age are married with children. I've had opportunities, women who were interested, but nothing ever felt right. I focused on the ranch, told myself that was enough. And now? Now I've met you and everything's different. You're intelligent, brave, independent. You don't need rescuing, you just needed a ride that one night. You're building something meaningful with your teaching, and I find myself thinking about you constantly, wondering if maybe there's room in your life for more than just work. Her heart hammered. Caleb, I came here to teach. That's my purpose, my calling. I won't give that up, not for anyone. I wouldn't ask you to. Violet, do you think I want a wife who sits at home and has no interests beyond cooking and mending? I want a partner, someone with her own mind and purpose. Teaching is important work, maybe the most important work there is. I'd never ask you to abandon it. Many men say that and then change their minds once marriage happens. I'm not many men. I'm me. And I'm telling you straight, if there's a future for us, it includes your teaching. I'd be proud to have a teacher for a wife. The word hung in the air between them. Wife. The future he was imagining, the life he was offering. This is happening very fast, Violet said, though her heart was singing. We've known each other a month. I know that's not long by some standards, but out here, people learn to recognize what matters quickly. Life's too uncertain to waste time on half measures. He took her hand carefully. I'm not asking you to marry me today. I'm asking if I can court you properly. If you'll give us a chance to see where this might lead. She looked at their joined hands, at his earnest face, at the beautiful valley spread before them.
Everything in her Philadelphia upbringing said this was reckless, that she should be cautious, that she barely knew this man. But her heart, and the part of her that had been brave enough to come west in the first place, knew the answer. Yes, court me properly. Let's see where this leads. His smile could have lit the valley. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture of respect and promise. Thank you. You won't regret this. I hope not. Because Caleb, I need you to understand, I won't be a conventional wife. I'm educated, opinionated, and stubborn. I wouldn't want you any other way. They rode back to the ranch as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. At the barn, as Violet learned to unsaddle Rosie and brush her down, Pete and Tommy appeared to take over. Pete winked at Caleb. Boss, those primers you got me? Working like a charm. I read a whole letter from my daughter last week, hardly needed help at all. That's wonderful, Pete. Miss James deserves the credit. She selected the materials. Then thank you, miss. Makes an old man feel young again, learning to read proper. On the drive back to town, with darkness falling and stars beginning their nightly emergence, Violet felt peace settle over her. This was right. Frightening, unexpected, impossibly fast, but right. At the boarding house, Caleb walked her to the door. Same time next Sunday? I'd like that. And Saturday evening, there's a harvest dance at the Hendersons. May I take you? Yes. He smiled, tipped his hat, and drove away into the night. Violet stood on the porch, watching until his wagon disappeared, feeling like a girl in a novel, except this was real, happening to her in Wyoming Territory in 1876. Agnes met her at the door with knowing eyes. You're glowing, child. We're courting, officially. Best news I've heard all year. Agnes hugged her. Caleb Irvine is as good as they come. Your life here is truly beginning. That night, Violet wrote to her aunt, a long letter describing the teaching, the town, and carefully mentioning Caleb. Her aunt would be thrilled. Her father, if he ever learned of it, would be furious. A cowboy, a rancher, not the refined Philadelphia match he'd imagined. But this wasn't about pleasing her father. This was about building a life that honored her mother's memory and her own dreams. Teaching children, yes, but also opening herself to love, to partnership, to possibilities she hadn't dared imagine. She fell asleep thinking of gray-blue eyes and careful hands, of a valley golden with aspens, of a future that might include both independence and belonging, both purpose and love. The cowboy who had lifted her gently into his wagon that first night was lifting her still, not away from her dreams, but toward a fuller, richer version of them than she had ever conceived possible. November arrived with the vengeance, bringing temperatures that made Violet grateful for every improvement Caleb had made to the schoolhouse stove. The children arrived each morning with frost in their hair and reddened cheeks, crowding around the warmth before reluctantly taking their seats. Outside, the landscape transformed daily. The remaining golden leaves stripped away by wind, the grass fading to brown, the sky taking on that peculiar crystalline quality that promised snow. Violet's courtship with Caleb continued through the changing season, growing deeper with each passing week. He came to town every Saturday without fail, bringing her small gifts that revealed how closely he paid attention. A book he thought she'd enjoy, purchased in Laramie, a set of new chalk when he noticed her supply running low, a warm shawl his mother had made years ago that he'd kept stored in a trunk. The shawl gift had made her eyes sting with emotion. "Are you certain?" she had asked, running her fingers over the soft wool. "This was your mother's. She would have wanted you to have it. She believed in education, in strong women making their own way. You would have liked each other." Their Sunday rides became a cherished ritual. Each week, Violet's confidence in the saddle grew until she could manage Rosie with minimal guidance, could even urge the gentle mare into a trot without fear. Caleb showed her different parts of his ranch, the winter pastures where cattle grazed on dried grass, the line shack where his hands stayed during storms, the ridge that overlooked his entire operation and half the valley beyond. They talked during these rides, really talked, sharing stories and dreams and fears in a way Violet had never experienced with anyone. She told him about her mother's death, about watching consumption slowly steal away the vibrant woman who had taught her to love learning. She confessed her complicated feelings about her father, love tangled with resentment, respect mixed with disappointment. "He wanted to protect you," Caleb observed during one ride. "He just didn't understand that sometimes protection feels like a prison." "Exactly. He couldn't see that I needed to choose my own path, even if it led somewhere he wouldn't have chosen for me." Caleb shared his own grief, losing his mother first, then watching his father slowly fade without her. Pa just gave up. The heart attack was almost a mercy because he'd already stopped living months before. I learned then that some loves run so deep that losing them breaks something fundamental. Doesn't that frighten you? Loving that deeply? He looked at her steadily. It did once. Not anymore. The implications hung between them, unspoken but understood. They were building towards something significant, both of them feeling the pull of a future that grew more concrete with each shared conversation. At school, Violet threw herself into teaching with renewed passion. Her students were progressing remarkably. Even the older boys who had been resistant now engaged with the material. Luke Patterson had become her unexpected ally, helping younger students with their reading and setting an example of respectful behavior that the other boys followed. One particularly cold Wednesday, as students huddled near the stove during morning arrival, Emma, the tiny 5-year-old, burst into tears. Violet knelt beside her immediately. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "My baby brother is sick, Miss James. Ma says he might die like Tommy Wilson's sister did last winter." A chill ran through Violet that had nothing to do with the temperature. She had heard about the Wilson child. Pneumonia had taken her in 3 days. Frontier medical care was limited at best, and children died with heartbreaking frequency from illnesses that would be survivable in cities with proper doctors. "I'm sure your mother is doing everything possible," Violet said gently, though her heart ached. "Have you been praying for him?" Emma nodded, tears streaming. "Every night. But I'm scared, Miss James." Violet gathered the small girl into her arms, feeling helpless. This was an aspect of frontier life she hadn't fully grasped, the constant presence of death, the way it hovered especially over the young and vulnerable. "Then we'll pray together. All of us." She looked at the assembled students. "Let's say a prayer for Emma's brother before we begin our lessons." The prayer was simple and heartfelt, and when it concluded, Violet saw tears on several other faces. These children understood mortality in ways their Eastern counterparts never would. They had all lost someone, siblings, parents, friends. During lunch, she mentioned the situation to Sarah Patterson, who had stopped by with bread for the school. Sarah's face grew grave. "The Miller baby." "Yes, I heard. Doc Fenton is doing what he can, but if it's pneumonia," she trailed off meaningfully. "I'll organize some meals for the family. That's about all we can do." The helplessness gnawed at Violet all day. That evening, she mentioned it to Agnes, who sighed heavily. "Welcome to Wyoming, dear. We lose too many little ones out here. Not enough doctors, too much distance, and winter is brutal on the weak. There must be something more we can do. Better knowledge of nursing, supplies kept on hand. Those things cost money most families don't have, and knowledge doesn't help much when the nearest doctor is 15 miles away and a blizzard is blowing." The conversation stayed with Violet. She had been so focused on teaching academics, reading, writing, arithmetic, but perhaps the schoolhouse could serve other purposes too. Maybe she could teach basic health practices, organize a lending library of medical texts, create a community hub where knowledge was shared beyond just children's lessons. She was mulling over these thoughts on Thursday evening when a knock at her boarding house door revealed Caleb, snow dusting his shoulders and concern creasing his face. "I heard about the Miller baby. I wanted to check on you. I know Emma is one of your students." The fact that he had ridden into town just to check on her emotional well-being made Violet's throat tighten. "That's thoughtful of you. I'm managing, but it's hard. That little girl's fear. I felt so helpless." That's the worst part of frontier life. Sometimes all we can do is pray and wait. He stamped snow from his boots. "But I didn't just come to check on you. There's weather coming, bad weather. The signs are all pointing to a significant storm within the next day or two." Agnes appeared from the kitchen. "How bad, Caleb?" "Bad enough that I'm riding around warning people. This won't be a regular snowfall. This feels like a blizzard. Tell Miss James she should consider dismissing school early tomorrow if the wind picks up." "I will," Violet promised. "Thank you for the warning." Stock up on firewood tonight. Make sure you have plenty of food and water on hand. If this hits as hard as I think it will, no one's going anywhere for a few days." He paused. "Violet, promise me you'll stay safe. Don't try to get to the school if conditions are dangerous." "I promise." After he left, Agnes moved into action with the efficiency of someone who had weathered many Wyoming winters. She sent Billy to stack extra wood near the stove, checked their food supplies, and filled every container with water. When Caleb Irvine says weather is coming, you listen. That man reads the land better than most people read books. Friday morning dawned gray and ominous. The wind had picked up during the night, and the temperature had dropped precipitously. Violet arrived at school to find only half her usual students. Parents who understood the signs had kept their children home. By noon, the wind was howling around the schoolhouse, and the first snow began falling. Not the gentle flakes of earlier storms, but hard, driving pellets that obscured visibility within minutes. Violet dismissed class immediately. "Go straight home," she instructed. "Don't dawdle, don't stop to play. This is serious weather." The children scattered, most living close enough to reach home quickly. Violet locked the schoolhouse and fought her way back to the boarding house through wind that threatened to knock her off her feet. By the time she stumbled through Agnes's door, she was half frozen and completely snow-covered. "Lord have mercy," Agnes exclaimed, pulling her inside. "Get those wet things off immediately." Within an hour, the storm had escalated to true blizzard conditions. Wind screamed around the building, snow fell so thickly that Violet couldn't see across the street, and the temperature plummeted until frost formed on the inside of the windows despite the roaring fire. The boarding house residents gathered in the common room, the warmest space, and settled in to wait out the storm. Mr. Harrison told stories of blizzards past. Mrs. Henderson knitted with furious concentration. Billy checked the woodpile every hour, ensuring they wouldn't run short. Violet tried to grade papers but found herself constantly drawn to the window, watching the white fury outside and thinking of Caleb on his ranch. Was he safe? Were his cattle surviving? The worry gnawed at her. "He'll be fine," Agnes said quietly, noticing Violet's anxiety. "Caleb knows how to handle weather. He'll have secured everything and taken shelter well before it got dangerous." But as afternoon faded to early evening and the storm showed no signs of abating, Violet's worry intensified. The blizzard was worse than anything she had experienced. The wind sounded alive, malevolent, rattling the building as if trying to tear it apart. Snow piled in drifts that reached the windowsills, and the cold was so intense that even sitting near the fire, she couldn't get warm. Just after 5 o'clock, a pounding at the door made everyone jump. Billy fought to open it against the wind, and a snow-covered figure stumbled inside. Caleb, barely recognizable under inches of accumulated snow and ice. "Good God, Caleb!" Agnes rushed forward. "What are you doing out in this?" "Had to check on people." He was shaking violently, his words slurred with cold. "The Hendersons' roof was damaged. I helped secure it, then checked on Mrs. Wilson living alone out on Creek Road. Made it to town to check." He swayed dangerously. Violet was at his side instantly, helping Agnes guide him to a chair near the fire. "You fool, you could have died. People needed help." His lips were blue, his face dangerously pale. Agnes barked orders. "Billy, get blankets. Mrs. Henderson, hot coffee. Now, Violet, help me get his coat off. Careful, the fabric's frozen stiff." They worked quickly, stripping away layers of frozen clothing, wrapping him in blankets, forcing hot coffee between his chattering teeth. Violet's hand shook as she rubbed his ice-cold fingers, trying to restore circulation. "You stubborn, impossible man," she whispered fiercely. "What were you thinking, riding around in a blizzard?" "Thinking people needed help," he managed, his eyes finding hers. "Including you. Had to make sure you were safe." Her anger evaporated, replaced by a tenderness so acute it hurt. "I'm safe. Thanks to you and your warnings, everyone got prepared, but you... Caleb, you could have frozen to death. Worth the risk." His shaking was beginning to subside as the warmth penetrated. "Couldn't sit at the ranch wondering if you were all right." Agnes exchanged a significant look with Mrs. Henderson. "Young man, you're staying here tonight. That storm isn't letting up, and I won't have you trying to ride back to your ranch in these conditions." "Don't want to impose." "You're not imposing, you're accepting hospitality. We have a spare room, and you're in no condition to go anywhere." Agnes's tone brooked no argument. Over the next hour, as Caleb gradually warmed and recovered, the full story emerged. He had spent the day securing his own ranch, then had ridden out to check on neighbors who might be in trouble. The Hendersons' damaged roof could have led to disaster. Mrs. Wilson, elderly and alone, had been running low on firewood. He had helped both before fighting his way to town to check on others. "That's who you are," Violet said quietly, sitting beside him with her hand wrapped around his, no longer caring who saw or what assumptions they made. "You put everyone else's safety before your own." "Not everyone. I was primarily worried about one person." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Agnes cleared her throat meaningfully. "Well, now that our hero has thawed, let's have dinner. We'll all feel better with hot food." The meal was simple but hearty: beef stew that had been simmering all day, fresh bread, and dried apple pie. The storm continued its assault outside, but inside the boarding house, warmth and companionship created an island of safety. Caleb's presence added something Violet couldn't quite name, a sense of security, of rightness, that went beyond the practical fact of having a strong man in the house during a crisis. After dinner, Mr. Harrison produced a worn deck of cards and taught Violet and Caleb a game called Pitch. Laughter filled the common room as mistakes were made and gentle teasing ensued. It struck Violet that this was what family felt like, not her austere Philadelphia home with its rigid protocols, but this: warmth, easy affection, people taking care of each other without expectation of reward. Around 9 o'clock, Agnes declared bedtime. "Caleb, you'll take the spare room at the end of the hall. There's a good feather bed and plenty of blankets. Violet, dear, help me bring up fresh linens." In the spare room as they made up the bed together, Agnes said quietly, "That man rode through a blizzard to make sure you were safe. If that's not love, I don't know what is." "Agnes, don't Agnes me. I've seen a lot of courtships in my day, and I'm telling you, what you two have is rare. Don't let fear or propriety or whatever else is holding you back get in the way of something real." Violet smoothed the quilts, thinking, what if I'm not ready? What if I fail at being what he needs? Nonsense. You're exactly what he needs. A woman with her own strength and purpose. And he's what you need, even if you're too stubborn to fully admit it yet. Agnes squeezed her hand. "Now go say goodnight before I send you to bed like one of the children." Caleb was standing at the common room window, watching the storm. He turned when Violet approached. "Still going strong. We might be stuck here a day or two." "Your ranch. Will it be all right?" "Pete and Tommy know what to do. The cattle will seek shelter in the draws. The horses are in the barn. It'll be fine." He smiled slightly. "I'm more worried about being stranded in a boarding house with limited entertainment. I'm sure we'll find ways to pass the time. I could teach you chess, or we could read. I have books in my room." "I'd like that. Reading with you sounds perfect." The intimacy of the statement hung between them. Outside, the wind shrieked, but inside, the warmth and quiet created a cocoon that felt separate from the rest of the world. "Caleb, what you did today, riding out to help people in these conditions, that was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish." "Probably more foolish than brave," he admitted. "But when I thought about you being in town, possibly in danger, possibly needing something, I couldn't just sit at the ranch. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. Because I spent the whole day worrying about you." He reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender and familiar. "I'm sorry I worried you, but I'm not sorry I came." "Neither am I." They stood close, the fire crackling behind them, the storm raging outside, and Violet felt the moment crystallize into something significant. This was what she had been afraid of back in Philadelphia. This vulnerability. This opening of her heart to someone who could hurt her. This risk of losing herself in someone else's needs. But standing here with Caleb, she understood that real love didn't diminish her. His respect for her work, his admiration for her independence, his willingness to support rather than control. These things made her stronger, not weaker. "I should let you rest," she said reluctantly. "You've had an exhausting day." "Violet, wait." He caught her hand gently. "I need to tell you something. These past weeks, getting to know you, seeing how you've built a life here and made a difference with those children, It's made me realize what I've been missing. I'm not good with fancy words, but I want you to know that this isn't casual for me. What we're building, it matters. You matter." Her throat tightened with emotion. "You matter to me too, more than I expected, more than I planned for." "Good." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in that gesture she had come to cherish. "Get some rest. I'll see you in the morning." Upstairs, lying in her bed listening to the storm, Violet felt something shift inside her. A surrender of sorts, but not the kind she had always feared. This was choosing to trust, choosing to believe that she could have both her vocation and this connection, choosing to open herself to possibilities that a few months ago would have seemed impossible. The night passed slowly, the storm relentless. Violet dozed fitfully, waking to the continued howl of wind and the rattle of windows. She thought of the Miller baby, hoped the family was weathering the storm safely. She thought of her students scattered across the valley, trusted that they were warm and protected. She thought of Caleb sleeping just down the hall, and the thought brought comfort. Morning arrived gray and bitter. The snow had stopped, but the wind continued, and drifts had transformed the landscape into an alien world of white curves and valleys. Violet came downstairs to find Caleb already up, helping Billy dig out the front door enough to access the woodpile. "Morning," he called, snow-covered and grinning. "Sleep well?" "As well as anyone could with that wind. How's it looking out there?" "Deep, very deep. No one's going anywhere today, maybe not tomorrow either. The town will be cut off until the wind dies down enough for men to start breaking trails." Agnes appeared with coffee and a practical attitude. "Well then, we'll make the best of it. I have enough food for a week if we're careful. We have plenty of wood. We'll be comfortable enough." The day developed a strange, suspended quality. The normal routines were impossible. No going to school, no business to conduct, no place to be except here. The boarding house residents settled into coexistence, finding ways to pass the time and stay warm. Caleb helped with physical tasks, hauling wood, shoveling snow, checking for damage. Mr. Harrison taught him and Violet to play whist. Mrs. Henderson shared recipes with Agnes while Violet helped prepare meals. Billy entertained them with stories of his misadventures as a young cowhand that had everyone laughing. In the afternoon, Violet retrieved several books from her room, and she and Caleb settled by the fire to read. She had chosen carefully, adventure stories that would appeal to him, nothing too scholarly or dull. He proved to be a slower reader than she expected, and she realized he probably hadn't had much opportunity for leisure reading. "Would you like me to read aloud?" she offered gently. "Would you? I'd enjoy that." She began reading The Last of the Mohicans, her voice bringing Cooper's frontier world to life. Caleb listened intently, occasionally asking questions about words or historical context. The other residents gradually joined them, drawn by the story, and soon Violet had an audience of 6 people hanging on every word. "You have a gift for that," Caleb said when she finally stopped, her voice growing hoarse. "The way you read, it's like watching the story unfold." "My mother used to read to me every evening. She believed literature was meant to be experienced, not just consumed silently. She was right. I'd pay good money to hear you read more. I'll read to you anytime you'd like. Consider it payment for rescuing me that first night. If those are the terms, I'll need to rescue you more often." The easy banter, the shared laughter, the comfortable silences, all of it felt natural in a way Violet had never experienced with anyone. There was no performance, no need to be anything other than herself. Caleb saw her completely and liked what he saw. The relief of that acceptance was profound. By evening, the wind had finally died down, leaving eerie silence in its wake. Caleb and Billy ventured outside to assess conditions and returned with sobering news. "It's bad," Caleb reported. "Drifts 8 feet high in places. The main street is completely blocked. It'll take organized effort to dig out the town, and then we'll need to check on outlying families." "Organize the men," Agnes said immediately. "Tomorrow morning, if the weather holds, get a crew together and start digging. We need to make sure everyone's accounted for." "I'll head to the Hendersons first. They've got the largest barn, and we can coordinate from there. But Agnes, I need to ask a favor. Can Violet stay here a few more days, even after I can get back to my ranch? I don't want her trying to walk to the school or being alone if another storm hits." She's welcome to stay as long as needed. This is her home now. The casual way Agnes said it, her home, made Violet's eyes sting. Home. When had Promise Creek become that? When had this rough little town and these people become so dear to her? That night, after another communal dinner and more reading, Violet found herself standing at her window watching moonlight turn the snow-covered landscape into something magical. A knock at her door revealed Caleb, looking uncertain. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I wanted to check that you're all right before I turn in." "I'm fine. Come in. It's too cold to stand in the hallway." He entered but left the door properly open. "I've been thinking about something. The storm. It's a reminder of how quickly things can change out here, how fragile life can be. And it's made me realize I don't want to waste time on prolonged courtship when I'm already certain of what I want." Her heart began to race. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Violet James. I've loved you since the night I found you sleeping beside your luggage, looking small and brave and completely out of place. I've loved you watching you teach those children, seeing you take on challenges most Eastern women wouldn't dream of facing. I love your intelligence, your determination, your kind heart." He took her hands. "I know it's fast. I know we haven't been courting long by conventional standards, but I also know my own heart, and I know I want to spend my life with you, supporting your teaching, building a home together, facing whatever comes." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Caleb, you don't have to answer now. I just needed you to know. When a blizzard hits and I'm thinking I might not see tomorrow, the thing I regret most is not telling you how I feel." He wiped her tears gently with his thumbs. "I'm not asking you to give up anything. I'm asking you to share your life with someone who thinks you're remarkable exactly as you are. I love you too." The words came out in a rush, surprising her with their certainty. "I didn't plan to. I came here focused on teaching, on proving I could build a life independently. But you've shown me that partnership doesn't mean losing myself. It means having someone who sees my dreams as clearly as I do and wants to help me achieve them." His smile was brilliant. "Is that a yes to courtship continuing?" "It's a yes to more than courtship. Caleb, I'll marry you. Not today, not tomorrow. We'll do this properly. Give people time to adjust to the idea, but yes. My answer is yes." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and she felt safe in a way that went beyond physical security. This was emotional safety, the knowledge that someone understood her completely and chose her anyway. "I promise you," he whispered against her hair, "I will spend every day earning that yes. I'll support your teaching, defend your choices, and never ask you to be less than you are. And I promise to be a true partner, to care about your ranch and your dreams as much as my own, to build a life together that honors both of us." They stood holding each other as moonlight filled the room and the world outside lay buried in snow. Somewhere in the town, the Miller baby was either recovering or lost. Somewhere, families were digging out from the storm, assessing damage, helping neighbors. Somewhere life continued in all its fragile, precious uncertainty. But here, in this moment, there was only certainty. The certainty of love found unexpectedly, of two lives choosing to intertwine, of a future that promised challenges and joys in equal measure. Caleb finally pulled back, his hands framing her face. "I should let you rest. But Violet, thank you. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who's better with cattle than words. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, not as a decorative wife or a civilizing influence, but as a person with value beyond what I can provide to a man. How could I see you as anything else? You're extraordinary." After he left, Violet sat on her bed, trembling with emotion. Everything had changed in the span of one conversation. She was engaged, informally, not yet publicly, but engaged nonetheless. She was going to marry Caleb Irvine and build a life that included both teaching and partnership, independence and belonging. Terror and joy warred inside her. This was what she had fled Philadelphia to avoid, becoming defined by a man, losing her autonomy. But this didn't feel like loss. This felt like gain, like expansion, like becoming more herself rather than less. She thought of her mother, wished desperately that Elizabeth James could know about this, could meet Caleb and see the life her daughter was building. Her mother would have approved, Violet was certain. Elizabeth had valued strength and integrity over social standing, had believed in partnerships of equals rather than traditional hierarchies. Sleep came fitfully again, but this time from excitement rather than worry. Tomorrow, life would resume, digging out from the storm, checking on students and families, returning to the routines of teaching. But everything would be different because she would be moving through the world as a woman engaged to be married, as someone building a future with a partner who respected her completely. The blizzard had forced them into proximity, into honesty, into facing feelings that might have taken months longer to acknowledge under normal circumstances. The storm had been terrifying and dangerous, but it had also been a gift, stripping away pretense and hesitation, revealing what was essential and true. As dawn broke gray and clear, Violet rose and dressed with a sense of purpose that went beyond the day's immediate tasks. She was Violet James, teacher and fiancée, independent woman and beloved partner. She was all of these things at once, and the contradiction didn't diminish her. It enriched her, made her more complex and complete. Downstairs, Caleb was already organizing the digging out efforts with Billy and Mr. Harrison. When he saw her, his face lit with a smile that made her heart soar. This was real. This was happening. And despite all her fears and all the uncertainty of frontier life, she had never felt more certain of anything. The day ahead would be hard work, clearing snow, checking on neighbors, ensuring everyone had survived the storm safely. But they would do it together, and then they would face tomorrow together, and all the tomorrows after that. The school teacher and the cowboy, building a life where both teaching and ranching mattered, where both their dreams had space to flourish, where love enhanced rather than erased individuality. Outside, Wyoming territory spread white and pristine under clearing skies, beautiful and harsh and honest. Exactly like the life Violet had chosen, exactly like the love she had found unexpectedly in the arms of a cowboy who had lifted her gently when she needed it most and was now lifting her into a future brighter than any she had dared imagine. The work of digging out Promise Creek took 3 days of backbreaking labor. Caleb organized crews of men who attacked the massive drifts with shovels and determination, clearing paths between buildings, checking on every family, ensuring no one had been trapped or injured. Violet watched from the boarding house windows, marveling at the way the community came together. Men working until exhaustion forced them to stop, women providing endless coffee and food, everyone focused on collective survival rather than individual comfort. The news, when it came in, was mixed. Most families had weathered the storm well, but there were losses. 3 head of cattle belonging to the Hendersons had frozen to death. Old Mrs. Wilson's chimney had been damaged, and she would need to stay with neighbors until repairs could be made. And the Miller baby, little Thomas, had died during the second night of the blizzard, his small lungs unable to fight the pneumonia that had seized them. Violet heard the news from Agnes and felt her heart break for Emma, for the whole Miller family. Death was part of frontier life. She understood that intellectually, but the reality of a 6-month-old child lost to winter's cruelty made her want to weep with rage and helplessness. "Can I visit the family?" she asked Agnes. "Should I?" "Give them a day or two. Then, yes, visit. They'll need to know the teacher cares, that Emma has support when she returns to school." School resumed on Monday, a full week after the blizzard had struck. The children arrived subdued, many of them having experienced their own losses or close calls during the storm. Emma came with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling lip, and Violet held her for a long moment before class began. "I'm so sorry about Thomas, sweetheart. Your family is in my prayers." Emma nodded mutely, then went to her seat with the heartbreaking composure of a child who has learned too young that life is fragile and tears must sometimes wait. The day was difficult, the children restless and distracted, the schoolhouse cold despite the repaired stove, Violet's own emotions too raw to maintain her usual patience. By the time she dismissed class, she felt wrung out and close to tears herself. She was locking the school when Caleb appeared as if sensing she needed him. He took one look at her face and simply opened his arms. She walked into them gratefully, letting his warmth and strength anchor her. "Rough day?" The Miller baby, Emma trying to be brave, all of them dealing with things children shouldn't have to face. She pulled back to look at him. "How do you bear it? The losses, the harshness, watching people suffer?" "You bear it because there's no choice.
And because for every loss, there are also victories, misses.
Wilson is alive because neighbors checked on her. The Pattersons' cattle survived because Luke remembered to move them to shelter. We lost the Miller baby, but we didn't lose anyone else. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You focus on what you can control and do your best with that. You teach those children to read and think and calculate, and that gives them better chances of surviving and thriving. That matters, Violet. What you do every day matters. I hope so. Some days I wonder if teaching grammar and arithmetic is enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. He took her hand. Come to the ranch with me. You need a break from town, from thinking about storms and loss. Come see the cattle. Watch the sunset from the ridge. Breathe air that doesn't smell like wood smoke and worry. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. She needed exactly what he was offering, space to breathe, beauty to remind her why life was worth fighting for, his steady presence to ground her spiraling thoughts. The ride to the ranch was cold but clear, the sky that impossible blue she was learning to associate with Wyoming's finest days. Snow still covered everything, but the sun's warmth hinted at eventual thaw. Red and Rosie moved easily through the cleared paths, their breath-forming clouds in the crisp air. At the ranch, Pete, Butt, and Tommy greeted her with genuine warmth. Pete was reading better every week, and he showed her proudly how he had written a letter to his daughter, short and simple, but entirely his own work. That's wonderful, Pete. Your daughter will treasure this. Thanks to you, miss. Never thought I'd be writing letters at my age. Caleb showed her around the ranch properly for the first time, explaining the operations with quiet pride. The barn where horses and milk cows sheltered, the chicken coop that provided eggs, the root cellar stocked with vegetables and preserved goods. The house itself was modest but well built, 2 stories with a wide porch, solid furniture made by his father's hands, windows that faced east to catch the morning sun. It needs a woman's touch, he said almost apologetically. My mother had curtains and rugs, plants in the windows. After she died, Pa couldn't bear to change anything, so it all stayed the same. After he passed, I just maintained what was there. It's functional, but not exactly welcoming. Violet looked around the main room with its stone fireplace, sturdy table, and simple chairs. She could see past the current austerity to what it could become. Curtains in cheerful colors, books on shelves, a rocking chair by the fire, the warmth of a home rather than just a house. It has good bones, she said, and potential. It just needs life brought back into it. That's what I'm hoping you'll do, bring life back. He met her eyes. I know we haven't announced anything yet, but Violet, I want you to know this will be your home too. Anything you want to change, any improvements you want to make, this is as much yours as mine. The generosity of it moved her. So many men viewed their homes as fiefdoms where wives were merely decorative tenants. Caleb was offering true partnership, equal ownership, not just legally, but emotionally. I'd like to add bookshelves, she said, testing. Lots of them. And maybe a desk where I can work on lesson plans and correspondence. Consider it done. I'll build them myself, or we'll hire someone if you prefer finer work than I can manage. They walked out to the ridge he had shown her before, the one with sweeping views of the valley and distant mountains. The snow made everything look different, pristine and almost ethereal, like something from a fairy tale rather than harsh reality. I've been thinking about timing, Caleb said as they sat on the same sun-warmed boulder where they had shared confidences before. For the wedding, I don't want to rush you, but I also don't want to wait longer than necessary. What did you have in mind? Spring seems reasonable. April or May, when the weather is more reliable and people can travel easily. That gives us 5 or 6 months to prepare, to let people adjust to the idea, to do things properly. He paused. Unless you'd prefer longer or shorter? Violet considered. 5 months felt right. Enough time to finish the school year, to plan a proper ceremony, to prepare for the transition from teacher living in a boarding house to wife of a rancher. But not so long that they were wasting time, they could be building a life together. May, she decided. After school concludes for the summer. That way I can finish the term without disruption, and we can start our marriage without me being torn between responsibilities. May it is then, he smiled. I suppose we should make it official. Announce it publicly, let people start congratulating us and offering unsolicited advice. Are you ready for that? The gossip, the attention, everyone having opinions about our business? I'm ready for anything that moves us closer to being married. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Though I admit, I'm not looking forward to telling Sarah Connors. She's been hinting for 2 years that she'd welcome my courtship. She'll recover. She's young and pretty. She'll have other suitors. Not like you, though. There's only one you. The simple sincerity of it made her throat tight. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Violet felt peace settle over her, the turmoil of the past week fading in the face of this beauty and this certainty. I should write to my father, she said eventually. Tell him about the engagement before he hears it from my aunt or through some other channel. He'll be furious, but he deserves to hear it from me. Will he try to stop you? He has no power to stop me. I'm of age and I'm here, not in Philadelphia. But yes, he'll try. He'll write terrible letters, possibly threaten to cut off all connection, rage about cowboys and frontier life, and his daughter throwing herself away. She sighed. It won't change my mind, but it will hurt. He's still my father, despite everything. I'm sorry you'll have to face that. If there's anything I can do, just be exactly who you are. That's all I need. They rode back to town as darkness fell, and Caleb walked her to the boarding house door. Agnes met them with barely contained excitement. Well, are you two going to make an announcement, or are you going to keep pretending the whole town doesn't already know you're courting? Caleb looked at Violet, eyebrows raised in question. She nodded. We're engaged, she said, unable to suppress her smile. We're planning a May wedding. Agnes let out a whoop of joy and pulled them both into enthusiastic hugs. I knew it. I told everyone Caleb Irvine had finally found his match. Oh, this is wonderful news. We must tell the others. Within minutes, the entire boarding house knew, and congratulations flowed freely. Mrs. Henderson immediately began offering advice about wedding planning. Mr. Harrison proposed a toast with the whiskey he kept for special occasions. Billy looked at Violet with something approaching awe, as if she had accomplished something miraculous by capturing Caleb's heart. The next day, news spread through Promise Creek with the speed of wildfire. Violet arrived at school to find several mothers waiting with congratulations and questions. The children buzzed with excitement. Their teacher was getting married to Mr. Irvine, and somehow this felt like a fairy tale come to life in their rough little town. Will you stop teaching when you marry? Sarah Patterson asked during the lunch break when she stopped by with Emma. No, Violet said firmly. Caleb supports my teaching, and the school board has agreed I can continue as long as I'm able and willing. This town needs a teacher, and I need the work. Marriage doesn't change that. Sarah's smile was approving. Good. Too many women give up their purpose when they marry. I'm glad you won't be one of them. Sunday at church, Reverend Collins made the engagement official during announcements, and the congregation erupted in applause. Violet felt her face flame with embarrassment and pleasure. These people were genuinely happy for them, invested in their happiness in a way that felt both overwhelming and deeply touching. After the service, they were mobbed with well-wishers. Sarah Connors approached looking pale but composed, and Violet braced for awkwardness. Congratulations, Miss James, Sarah said with apparent sincerity. Caleb is a good man. I hope you'll be very happy. Thank you, Sarah. That's gracious of you. I won't pretend I'm not disappointed. I had hoped, well, never mind what I hoped. You're clearly right for each other in ways I never could have been. I wish you both every happiness. After she left, Caleb exhaled. That went better than I expected. She's a good person. She'll find someone who appreciates her properly. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Violet continued teaching with renewed energy, knowing she was building something permanent here. Caleb visited town more frequently, often staying for dinner at the boarding house, becoming a familiar presence in Violet's daily life. They began making concrete plans, discussing where they would live. The ranch, with Violet keeping a small room in town for nights she needed to stay late preparing lessons. How to blend their belongings. What changes the house needed. In December, Violet wrote the dreaded letter to her father. She crafted it carefully, explaining her decision with respect but firmness, making clear that his approval, while desired, was not required. She told him about Caleb's character, the life she was building, the happiness she had found. She posted it with trembling hands and braced for the storm. The response came in January, a furious missive that accused her of throwing away her breeding and education on a common laborer, of breaking her mother's heart, as if Elizabeth James, dead 5 years, could be disappointed by her daughter finding love and purpose, of bringing shame on the family name. He concluded by stating that if she persisted in this foolishness, she would no longer be considered his daughter. Violet read the letter in her boarding house room and wept, not because it changed her mind, but because it hurt to be rejected so completely by the man who should have wanted her happiness above all else. She was sitting red-eyed and miserable when Agnes knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "Bad news from Philadelphia?" Violet handed over the letter mutely. Agnes read it, her expression darkening with anger. "What a pompous, small-minded fool. I'm sorry, dear. I know he's your father, but this is inexcusable. He's disowned me. Then he has lost something precious, and that's his tragedy, not yours." Agnes sat beside her, taking her hand. "Violet, listen to me. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to love and support you. Your father has failed in that regard, but you have family here. Me, the Pattersons, the whole town, and especially Caleb. You're not alone, and you're not unloved." "I know, it just hurts." "Of course it hurts, but don't let his narrow views make you doubt your choices. You're building a beautiful life here with a man who adores you. That's worth celebrating, not mourning." That evening, when Caleb arrived for dinner and saw her distress, he pulled her aside. "What happened?" She explained haltingly, showing him the letter. His jaw tightened as he read, and when he finished, he folded it carefully and set it aside. "I'm sorry. You deserve better from him. Maybe I'm making a mistake. Maybe I should—" "Stop." He took her face in his hands, making her look at him. "You're not making a mistake. Your father is wrong about me, about this life, about your choices. You are brave and brilliant and exactly where you're meant to be. Don't let his fear and prejudice poison what we're building. I just wish, I know. You wish you could see what I see, be proud of what you've accomplished, celebrate your happiness. But Violet, some people can't or won't change. You can't make him see clearly if he's determined to stay blind. All you can do is live your life fully and well, and surround yourself with people who appreciate you." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his steady conviction. "You're right. I know you're right. Your mother would be proud of you. I'm certain of that." "How can you be certain? You never met her." "Because she raised you. Because her values shaped you into who you are. A woman who taught her daughter to pursue education and independence wouldn't condemn that daughter for choosing a life that honors those principles. Your mother would see this for what it is, love and partnership built on mutual respect. She'd approve." His words settled something inside her. He was right. Her mother would have approved. Elizabeth James had wanted her daughter to have choices, to build a meaningful life, to find love that expanded rather than diminished her. She had found exactly that, and her father's disapproval couldn't change the rightness of it. The winter deepened, bringing more snow and bitter cold, but also bringing the community closer together. Violet organized a Christmas program at the school, and the children performed poems and songs for proud parents packed into the small building. Caleb came and watched with visible emotion as she conducted her students through their program, and afterward he told her quietly, "You're changing their lives. Every one of them is better for having you as their teacher." Christmas Day was spent at the boarding house with Agnes hosting a feast for her residents and several guests who had nowhere else to go. Caleb gave Violet a delicate cameo brooch that had belonged to his mother, and she gave him a leather journal for recording ranch notes and observations. They exchanged the gifts privately in the common room before others came down for breakfast, and the intimacy of the moment, just the two of them in the early morning quiet, felt like a preview of their future married life. January brought bitter cold and short days, but also brought planning in earnest for the wedding. Agnes took charge of organizing the church and reception, declaring that she had been waiting years for Caleb to marry, and she would ensure it was done properly. Mrs. Patterson offered to make Violet's dress, having skills with a needle that bordered on artistry. The whole town seemed invested in the wedding, offering help with food, flowers, music, anything that might be needed. It's like planning a community celebration rather than a private ceremony. Violet told Caleb during one of their Sunday rides. The weather had warmed slightly, allowing them to venture out to their favorite spots. That's how it should be. These people care about us. They want to participate in our happiness. Let them. I'm not used to community operating this way. In Philadelphia, weddings were private affairs, very controlled and formal. This is Wyoming. We do things differently here. Everyone knows everyone's business anyway, so we might as well celebrate it together. He grinned. Besides, have you tasted Mrs. Henderson's cakes? Trust me, you want her involved in this wedding.
February brought the first hints of thaw, days where the sun had real warmth, where icicles dripped and snow began receding from south-facing slopes. Violet's students grew restless with the approach of spring, harder to keep focused on lessons when the world outside was awakening. She adapted by taking classes outside on warmer days, teaching geography by exploring the local landscape, mathematics by measuring distances and calculating angles. Luke Patterson, now her staunchest supporter, had grown into a real leader among the older students. He helped the younger ones with their work, defended Violet's authority when other boys got rowdy, and had even started talking about possibly attending college someday if he could save enough money. "You've done that," Sarah Patterson told Violet during a visit. "Given my son ambition beyond just surviving. He talks about maybe becoming a teacher himself or a lawyer. Dreams I never thought he'd have. He's bright and capable. He could do anything he sets his mind to. Thanks to you showing him that education opens doors. You've made such a difference here, Violet. I hope you know that." March arrived with mud and wind, that difficult transition season where winter refused to fully release its grip, while spring pushed insistently forward. Violet and Caleb finalized their wedding plans. May 15th at the church, reception at the Hendersons' barn, honeymoon at the ranch since neither of them wanted to leave during spring work. Violet had chosen a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson was sewing with exquisite care, and Caleb had ordered a new suit from a catalog, determined to look worthy of his bride. The school year was winding toward completion. Violet assessed her students' progress and felt genuine pride. Every child had advanced significantly. Even the ones who had started barely able to write their names were now reading simple texts and solving arithmetic problems. The parents were pleased, the school board was delighted, and Violet knew she had proven herself beyond any doubt. In April, as the landscape finally committed to green and trees began budding, Caleb took Violet to the ranch to show her the changes he had made. He had built bookshelves in the main room exactly as she had requested, beautiful, sturdy shelves that filled one entire wall. He had constructed a desk by the window where morning light would be perfect for working. He had even hung new curtains, simple but cheerful, that transformed the space from austere to welcoming. "I wanted you to see it before the wedding," he explained, watching her reaction anxiously. "So you know this is really your home, that I'm serious about making space for you and your work." She walked through the rooms, touching the shelves, sitting at the desk, imagining her books filling the spaces he had created. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and when he rushed to her in concern, she laughed through the tears. "These are happy tears. This is perfect. You've created exactly what I needed without me even having to ask." "I've been paying attention. I know how much your books and teaching mean to you. Our home needs to reflect that." In the bedroom upstairs, the room that would become theirs, he had built more shelves for her clothes and personal items, had ensured there was space for her trunk and belongings, had made it clear that this wasn't his room she was moving into, but their room being created together. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," she said quietly, "but I thank God every day that you came down that road the night you found me. I'm the lucky one. I was living half a life before you, working, surviving, but not really living. You've brought color and warmth and meaning to everything." He pulled her close. "One more month and you'll officially be Mrs. Irvine. I can barely wait." "One more month," she agreed, and the words felt like a promise and a prayer combined. The final weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Violet completed the school year with a ceremony where each student received a certificate of completion that she had painstakingly written by hand. Parents attended and applauded, and several mothers approached afterward with tears in their eyes, thanking her for what she had done for their children. "You'll come back in the fall, won't you?" one father asked anxiously. "The children need you." "I'll be back," she assured him. "Marriage won't change that. I'll be teaching from the ranch instead of living in town, but I'll be here every school day." The school board formally renewed her contract at a public meeting, making clear that her marriage was not an impediment to continued employment. It was unusual. Most female teachers were required to resign upon marriage, but Promise Creek needed her enough to make exceptions, and Caleb's support made it possible. The week before the wedding brought a flurry of final preparations. The dress was completed and fit perfectly. The church was cleaned and decorated with wildflowers. The Hendersons' barn was transformed into a reception hall with borrowed tables and chairs, lanterns for light, and a space cleared for dancing. Agnes coordinated food contributions from every household in town, ensuring there would be enough to feed everyone who came. Caleb's hands, Pete and Tommy, gave the ranch house a final deep cleaning and made themselves scarce for the wedding week, planning to stay at a line shack to give the newlyweds privacy. Pete had become remarkably literate through his practice and had written a speech to give at the reception, a fact that made him both proud and terrified. The day before the wedding, Violet's aunt sent a telegram, the first communication she had received from Philadelphia since her father's rejection. It was brief. "Your mother would be proud, wishing you every happiness. Love. Aunt Margaret." Violet clutched the telegram and wept. She had her mother's blessing through her aunt's words, and that felt like enough. Her father's rejection still hurt, but it no longer had the power to overshadow her joy. That evening, Agnes hosted a small dinner for Violet with just women: Sarah Patterson, Mrs. Henderson, several other women from town who had become friends. They gave her practical advice about marriage and running a ranch household, shared stories and laughter, and showered her with small gifts, jars of preserves, embroidered linens, recipes written in careful hands. "You've become one of us," Agnes said, raising a glass. "When you arrived 7 months ago, you were an Eastern girl, scared and alone on a dark road. Now you're a teacher, a friend, and tomorrow you'll be Caleb Irvine's wife. We're proud of you, Violet, and grateful you chose to stay." The sentiment was echoed around the table, and Violet felt the truth of Agnes's earlier words. Family was about more than blood. These women were her family now, and Promise Creek was her home in ways Philadelphia had never been. That night, lying in her boarding house room for the last time, Violet reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. 7 months ago, she had been exhausted and frightened, abandoned on a dark road, convinced she had made a terrible mistake in coming west. Now she was loved, established, on the verge of marrying a man who valued everything about her. Tomorrow, she would walk down the aisle of Promise Creek's simple church and pledge her life to Caleb Irvine. She would become a wife without ceasing to be a teacher, would join her life to his while maintaining her own identity and purpose. It was everything she had hoped for and more than she had dared dream. Through her window, she could see the stars, those same brilliant, countless stars that had shone the night Caleb had found her. They seemed like witnesses to her journey, silent observers of her transformation from frightened girl to confident woman, from stranger to beloved community member, from solitary individual to half of a partnership that promised joy and challenge in equal measure. May 15th dawned clear and perfect, with warm sun and a gentle breeze that seemed to bless the day. Violet woke with butterflies dancing in her stomach, equal parts nervous and excited. Today her life truly began. Agnes helped her dress, fussing over every detail of the white gown that fit like a dream. Mrs. Patterson had outdone herself. The dress was simple but elegant, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs that echoed the wildflowers Violet would carry. Her hair was pinned up with small white blossoms woven through, and her mother's cameo brooch, not the one her father had kept but one her aunt had sent years ago, rested at her throat. "You're beautiful," Agnes said, tears streaming. "Absolutely beautiful. Caleb is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." At the church, the entire town had gathered. Every pew was full, and people stood along the walls and in the doorway. Violet had worried that the ceremony might feel impersonal with so many observers, but instead it felt right. These people who had welcomed her, supported her, become her family deserved to witness this moment. Reverend Collins stood at the front, beaming. Beside him waited Caleb, wearing his new suit and looking nervous and impossibly handsome. His eyes found Violet as she entered, and the expression that crossed his face made her heart soar. Agnes had been right.
He looked like a man who had forgotten how to breathe, stunned by what he was seeing. There was no one to give her away. Her father's absence was a small ache she pushed aside. So she walked alone down the aisle, head high, choosing this path of her own free will. That felt appropriate somehow. She was choosing Caleb just as he was choosing her, two independent people deciding to build something together. At the altar, he took her hand, and she felt the tremor in his fingers. He was as nervous as she was, as overcome by the significance of this moment. Reverend Collins began the ceremony with words about love and partnership, commitment and faith. Violet barely heard them, too focused on Caleb's face, on the way he looked at her like she was something precious and miraculous. When it came time for vows, his voice was steady despite the emotion clearly visible in his eyes. I, Caleb Irvine, take you, Violet James, to be my wife. I promise to honor your dreams and support your work. I promise to be your partner in building a life that brings joy to both of us. I promise to love you in good times and bad, in health and sickness, for all the days of my life. Her own voice was less steady, trembling with feeling as she spoke. I, Violet James, take you, Caleb Irvine, to be my husband. I promise to be your true partner, to value your work as you value mine, to build a home filled with love and respect. I promise to stand beside you through whatever challenges come, to choose you every day for all the days of my life. The rings were simple gold bands, and as Caleb slipped hers onto her finger, his thumb caressed her knuckles in that gesture she had come to love. When Reverend Collins pronounced them married and invited Caleb to kiss his bride, the kiss was tender and full of promise, a beginning rather than a culmination. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. They walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, husband and wife, and emerged into glorious sunshine to find the whole town celebrating. Rice flew through the air, children laughed and danced, adults called congratulations and blessings. At the reception in the Hendersons' transformed barn, food covered every surface and music filled the air. They danced their first dance as husband and wife to fiddle and guitar, moving together with the easy rhythm they had developed over months of practice. Other couples joined them, and soon the barn was full of swirling, laughing people, celebrating not just a wedding, but the affirmation that love could flourish even in harsh places, that hope and happiness were possible even in the demanding frontier. Pete gave his speech, haltingly but clearly, about how Caleb was the best boss he'd ever known, and how Miss James, Mrs. Irving now, had given an old man the gift of literacy. Several people wiped away tears, including Pete himself. Sarah Patterson toasted the couple with words about how Violet had taught the town's children and now was teaching them all about what true partnership looked like. Luke stood beside his mother, grinning broadly, clearly pleased that his favorite teacher had found happiness. As the evening wore on and the sun set, casting golden light through the barn's open doors, Violet found a quiet moment with Caleb. They stood slightly apart from the celebration, watching their community dance and laugh and celebrate on their behalf. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I knew was possible." "You?" "Beyond words. I keep thinking I'll wake up and discover this was all a dream, that you're still sitting beside your luggage on that dark road and I haven't found you yet." She leaned into him. "Not a dream. Real. Completely real." "Mrs. Irvine," he said, testing the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I. Though I'll still be Miss James at school, it's less confusing for the students." "Whatever you prefer. You're still you, regardless of the name." Around 9 o'clock, they slipped away from the celebration to cheers and well wishes. Caleb had decorated the wagon with ribbons and flowers, and Rosie wore a garland around her neck. They drove through the spring evening toward the ranch, toward their home, toward the life they would build together. The house glowed with lamplight. Pete and Tommy had lit lanterns throughout before departing, making it welcoming. Caleb helped Violet down from the wagon, and then, without warning, swept her into his arms. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold. It's tradition." He carried her inside and set her down gently in the main room with its bookshelves and new curtains, its desk and rocking chair, its transformation from house to home. Violet turned slowly, taking it all in. This space that was now hers, that would hold their life together, that represented every dream she had nurtured and some she hadn't dared imagine. Caleb came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist,
and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irvine." The words settled into her heart, fitting perfectly into spaces she hadn't known were empty. Home. Not the Philadelphia townhouse where she had been raised but never truly felt she belonged. Not the boarding house where she had found temporary shelter. This ranch house in Wyoming territory, with the man who had lifted her gently when she needed it most, who saw her completely and loved what he saw. "Welcome home," she echoed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Outside, the stars were emerging, brilliant and countless as always. Inside, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm light over new beginnings. The schoolteacher and the cowboy stood together in their home, two lives now joined in partnership, ready to face whatever tomorrow brought with shared strength and shared dreams. From that frightened girl sleeping beside her luggage, Violet had become a woman of courage and purpose, a teacher and a wife, independent and beloved. The journey had been unexpected and sometimes terrifying, but it had led her exactly where she needed to be, home, at last, in every sense of the word. The first weeks of marriage unfolded with a sweetness Violet had never anticipated. She woke each morning in the bedroom Caleb had prepared, sunlight streaming through east-facing windows, her husband's steady breathing beside her a comfort she was learning to treasure. The ranch work started before dawn, and she rose with him, preparing breakfast while he tended to the animals, finding joy in the domestic rhythms she had once feared would cage her. But the fears had been groundless. Caleb never asked her to sacrifice her teaching or conform to some idealized vision of wifehood. Instead, he adapted his schedule to support hers, driving her to town each school day before dawn so she could prepare lessons, picking her up each afternoon so they could return home together. On days when weather was poor or he was tied up with ranch work, Rosie became Violet's reliable transportation, the gentle mare carrying her safely between school and home. The students adjusted to calling her Mrs. Irvine with varying degrees of success. Emma still occasionally slipped and called her Miss James, then blushed furiously at the mistake. Luke Patterson teased that getting married hadn't made her any less strict about homework, which Violet took as the compliment it was intended to be. June brought the end of the school year and a freedom Violet embraced with relief. She had worked hard through the year, and the summer stretched before her like a gift. Time to truly settle into ranch life, to learn the rhythms of cattle and horses, to become not just Caleb's wife but his genuine partner in all aspects of their life. Pete and Tommy became her teachers in practical matters, showing her how to milk the cows, collect eggs without frightening the hens, identify which plants in the vegetable garden were crops and which were weeds. Tommy, younger and more talkative than Pete, shared stories of his own childhood in Missouri and asked endless questions about teaching, fascinated by the idea that someone could make a living from books and learning. "You ever regret it?" he asked one morning as they weeded the garden together. "Giving up city life for this?" "I didn't give up anything," Violet replied, pulling a stubborn thistle from between the potato plants. "I exchanged something that wasn't working for something that does. Philadelphia was beautiful in its way, but I was suffocating there. Here, I can breathe. Even with all the hard work, the isolation, the way winter tries to kill everything?" She laughed. "Even with all that, Tommy, purpose matters more than comfort. I have purpose here. Teaching the children, building a home with Caleb, being part of a community that actually needs what I have to offer. That's worth more than any amount of refined society." He nodded thoughtfully, then grinned. "Boss is a lucky man. Not every woman would see it that way." The ranch work was indeed hard. Harder than Violet had fully understood before living it daily. There were cattle to check on, fences to repair, hay to cut and stack for winter, endless maintenance on buildings and equipment. Caleb worked from before sunrise until after sunset most days, driven by the knowledge that every task completed now meant better chances of surviving the next winter. But he never let the work consume everything. He still made time for their evening rides, for sitting on the porch watching sunsets, for reading together by lamplight after supper. He asked about her lesson plans for the coming year, offered suggestions based on his understanding of the community's needs, listened with genuine interest as she described her ideas for expanding the curriculum. "What if we started a lending library?" Violet proposed one evening as they sat together on the porch, the day's heat finally fading. "Not just for students, but for anyone in the community who wants to borrow books.
I have my own collection, and I could write to my aunt about donations. Education shouldn't stop just because school is out. That's a fine idea. We could build shelves in the schoolhouse, make it accessible to everyone. I'd bet several families would contribute books they've finished with. You'd help build the shelves? Violet, anything that supports your teaching, I support. Besides, a more educated community benefits everyone. Better decisions, better outcomes, fewer tragedies born of simple ignorance. She leaned against his shoulder, grateful for his consistent support. Sometimes I still can't believe you're real, that I found someone who genuinely values what I do. Sometimes I can't believe you chose me, a cowboy who's better with horses than words, who can offer you nothing but hard work and a modest ranch in the middle of nowhere. You offer me partnership, respect, love that doesn't demand I become smaller to fit into it. That's everything, Caleb. That's more than most women ever get. He kissed the top of her head, and they sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged in the darkening sky. These moments of peace, of shared contentment, were becoming the foundation of their marriage. Not grand gestures or passionate declarations, but quiet connection and mutual appreciation. July brought intense heat and the hard work of haying. Violet helped where she could, learning to drive the wagon while Pete and Tommy forked hay into it, her arms aching by day's end, but her sense of accomplishment genuine. She was becoming part of the ranch's operation, not just an ornament in the house, but a contributing member of the team. The community continued to embrace her. Agnes stopped by regularly with baked goods and gossip, keeping Violet connected to town news. Sarah Patterson visited with Emma, sharing coffee and conversation while the children played. Even Mrs. Henderson, initially skeptical of an Eastern teacher, had warmed completely, frequently seeking Violet's advice on various matters. In early August, a letter arrived that made Violet's hand shake as she opened it. The handwriting was her father's, and she braced for more recrimination and rejection. Instead, she found something unexpected. The letter was brief and stiff, but its content was revolutionary. Marcus James acknowledged that he had been harsh in his previous correspondence. He didn't apologize exactly, but he expressed grudging respect for Violet's determination to build a life on her own terms. He mentioned that Aunt Margaret had shared news of Violet's marriage and teaching success, and that while he still didn't understand her choices, he was willing to maintain contact if she wished it. The letter concluded with a sentence that made Violet's eyes blur with tears. Your mother would have been proud of your courage. I find I cannot deny that truth. She showed the letter to Caleb that evening, and he read it carefully before responding. It's not an apology, but it's a start. The question is, do you want to rebuild that relationship? I don't know. Part of me wants to reject him the way he rejected me, show him how it feels. But another part remembers the good times, before Mother died, when he was gentler and she balanced his rigidity. That father is worth keeping contact with, if he still exists under the bitterness. Then write back. Keep the door open. You don't have to forgive everything, but you can allow the possibility of reconciliation over time. She drafted a response that night, measured and dignified, acknowledging his letter without surrendering her position. She described her life honestly, the teaching she loved, the husband who supported her completely, the community that had become family. She invited him to visit if he ever wished to see for himself what she had built. She didn't expect him to come, but extending the invitation felt important, a gesture of grace that honored her mother's memory. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the preparation for a new school year. Violet spent days organizing the schoolhouse, implementing her lending library idea with books donated by community members and a substantial shipment from Aunt Margaret. The shelves Caleb built were sturdy and beautiful, and soon they held over 100 volumes available to anyone who wanted them. The new school year began with familiar faces and several new students, younger siblings of her existing pupils, plus 2 families that had moved to the area specifically because they'd heard Promise Creek had an excellent teacher. The influx was flattering and slightly overwhelming, bringing her student count to 23. Among the new students was a 13-year-old girl named Margaret Hayes, whose family had relocated from Ohio. Margaret was bright and hungry for learning but had been poorly taught in her previous schools, leaving her behind where she should have been. Violet recognized a kindred spirit, a girl who loved learning but had been failed by inadequate instruction. Stay after school today, Violet told her at the end of the first week. I want to assess where you are and create a plan to get you caught up. Margaret's eyes lit with hope and anxiety in equal measure. I'm not stupid, Mrs. Irvine. I know I'm behind. The other kids have had consistent instruction, which you haven't. That's not stupidity, Margaret. That's circumstance. We're going to fix it. Over the following weeks, Violet worked with Margaret during lunch breaks and after school, filling in gaps and building confidence. The girl blossomed under the attention, her intelligence emerging now that someone was actually teaching rather than just assigning work. By October, she had caught up to grade level and was pushing beyond it. You're a natural teacher, Caleb observed one evening when Violet described Margaret's progress. You see potential in students that others miss. I see myself in her. I was lucky. My mother recognized my hunger for learning and fed it. Margaret needed someone to do the same. How can I not help when I have the knowledge she needs? That's why you're remarkable. Not everyone with knowledge shares it generously. The fall proceeded beautifully. Violet's marriage and teaching both flourished, each enhancing rather than competing with the other. Caleb's support never wavered, and his pride in her work was evident to everyone. He attended the school's autumn program, sitting in the back with other parents, beaming as Violet students recited poetry and demonstrated their learning. In November, a circuit court judge arrived in Promise Creek for his quarterly visit, and with him came unexpected news. He had been approached by the Territorial Education Board about establishing teacher training programs in various communities. They were looking for experienced, successful teachers to serve as mentors for new instructors. Would Mrs. Irvine be interested? The proposal thrilled and terrified Violet in equal measure. Training other teachers meant expanding her impact beyond just her own students, potentially improving education across the entire territory. But it also meant additional responsibility and time commitment. What does your instinct say? Caleb asked when she brought the proposal home for discussion. My instinct says yes. This is an opportunity to make teaching better for countless children, not just the ones in my classroom. But I worry about taking on too much, about whether I can balance it with our life here. Can you do the training during summer months when school is out? Mostly, yes. They'd bring new teachers here for intensive training, maybe 3 or 4 at a time. I'd work with them for several weeks, then they'd go to their own assignments with ongoing support through correspondence. That seems manageable. And Violet, this is exactly the kind of work you're meant to do. You're an exceptional teacher. That expertise should be shared as widely as possible. His enthusiasm made her decision easy. She accepted the position, and plans were made for the first cohort of trainee teachers to arrive the following summer. The Territorial Board would pay for the program, providing additional income that would help build security for their future. December brought the first serious snow, and with it, a reminder of winter's dangers. A family living 15 miles from town, the Carlsons, lost their home to fire just before Christmas. The father had been injured trying to fight the blaze, and the family was left with nothing but the clothes they wore. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, families had donated clothes, food, tools, and lumber. Caleb organized a crew to build a temporary shelter that would get the Carlsons through winter, with plans for a proper house in spring. Violet led a collection at the school, and the children contributed pennies and goods with a generosity that made her throat tight with emotion. This is what community means, she told her students as they packed boxes for the Carlsons. When tragedy strikes, we take care of each other. No one survives the frontier alone. We survive together. Emma, now 6 and reading well beyond her age level, looked up from the doll she was wrapping as a gift for the Carlson children. Is that why you came here, Mrs. Irvine? To be part of a community? Partially, yes. I wanted to be somewhere I was needed, where my work mattered. Here, teaching matters. Each of you matters. And when we help families like the Carlsons, we're proving that people matter more than things. Christmas that year was simple but joyful. Violet and Caleb hosted dinner for Pete and Tommy, Agnes, and the Pattersons, cramming people around their table and filling the house with laughter and warmth. Gifts were modest. Caleb gave Violet a beautiful handmade bookend carved with flowers, and she gave him a new winter coat she had sewn with Agnes's help. But the love and thought behind them made them precious. As they stood together on the porch after everyone had left, watching snow fall gently in the lamplight, Caleb pulled Violet close. This has been the best year of my life because of you. Mine too. When I was sitting on that road in October last year, terrified and alone, I couldn't have imagined this, that I'd find love and purpose, community and home, that I'd be standing here 1 year later, married to the man who rescued me, genuinely happy in ways I didn't know were possible. You rescued me too, you know. I was going through motions, working hard but never really living. You brought life back to this house, to this ranch, to me. He kissed her forehead gently. Thank you for choosing this life, for choosing me. I choose you again every day, in every circumstance. You're the best decision I ever made. The new year brought bitter cold and short days, but also brought anticipation. Violet suspected she was pregnant, though it was early yet to be certain. She hadn't told Caleb, wanting to be sure before raising hopes, but the possibility filled her with a mixture of joy and anxiety. A child would change everything, adding new dimensions to their already full life. By February, she was certain. She told Caleb one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. I'm going to have a baby. Sometime in late July, I think. His expression cycled through shock, joy, and concern in rapid succession. You're sure? As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. But Caleb, all the signs are there. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. This is wonderful, terrifying, but wonderful. Are you all right? Do you feel well? Mostly tired, some nausea in the mornings, but Agnes says that's normal. She's been helping me understand what to expect. Agnes knows? Already? Agnes knows everything. She guessed before I told her. Violet pulled back to look at him. Are you happy about this? I know we didn't plan. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Scared, yes. This frontier is hard on women and children, and I'm terrified something will happen to you. But Violet, a child, our child, it's everything I didn't know I wanted. His honest emotion made her eyes sting. I want to keep teaching as long as I'm able, at least through this school year. After the baby comes, we'll have to figure out arrangements, but I'm not giving up my work entirely. I wouldn't expect you to. We'll find solutions. Maybe you take a term off, then go back part-time. Maybe we hire someone to help with the baby. Whatever works for both of us, we'll figure it out together. The pregnancy changed some logistics, but didn't fundamentally alter their life. Violet continued teaching through winter and spring, her energy flagging as the baby grew, but her commitment unwavering. The students noticed her changing shape and asked questions with the frank curiosity of children, which Violet answered honestly and age-appropriately. Margaret Hayes, now thriving academically and the top student in the school, approached Violet one day after class. Mrs. Irvine, I've been thinking, when I'm old enough, I'd like to become a teacher like you. Would you help me prepare? The request touched Violet deeply. I'd be honored to help you, Margaret. Teaching needs intelligent, dedicated women. You'd be excellent at it. My pa says teaching isn't practical, that I should focus on finding a husband, but I want to do something meaningful first, like you did. You can do both if you find the right partner. Mr. Irvine supports my teaching completely. Not all men would, but good men do. Don't settle for someone who asks you to be less than you're capable of being. In April, Violet completed her school year slightly early, the physical demands of late pregnancy making the work increasingly difficult. The school board and parents understood, and several mothers volunteered to supervise the last 2 weeks so the children could finish their lessons. Violet was grateful for the community support, even as she felt guilty for not powering through. You're growing a human being, Agnes said firmly when Violet expressed her guilt. That's work enough without also teaching 23 children. Rest, prepare for the baby, and stop feeling guilty for having physical limitations. The final weeks of pregnancy were uncomfortable and anxious. The nearest doctor was in Laramie, too far to be practical for delivery. Instead, Agnes would attend the birth, assisted by Mrs. Patterson, who had delivered most of the babies born in Promise Creek over the past decade. Both women were experienced and capable, but Violet couldn't entirely suppress her fear. Childbirth killed women regularly on the frontier, and she was acutely aware of the risks. Caleb was even more terrified, though he tried to hide it. She caught him watching her with expressions of mingled love and worry, saw how his hand shook slightly when he helped her with tasks. Her increased size made difficult, One night in late July, unable to sleep due to discomfort, she found him sitting on the porch in darkness. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, easing herself into the chair beside him. "Too worried." "Violet, I'm terrified."
What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you? You won't lose me. Agnes and Mrs. Patterson are experienced. Women do this all the time and survive. Women also die. I've seen it happen. And the thought of losing you, I can't breathe when I think about it. She took his hand, squeezing hard. Then don't think about it. Think about meeting our child. Think about the future we're going to build. Fear won't protect us, Caleb. We just have to trust that we'll get through this like we've gotten through everything else. Together. Labor began on July 28th, a hot summer day that stretched into a long, difficult night. Caleb paced outside the bedroom where Agnes and Mrs. Patterson attended Violet, occasionally allowed in to offer encouragement before being shooed out again. Pete and Tommy kept him company, offering whiskey he refused and reassurance he couldn't quite believe. The hours blurred into pain and effort, fear and determination. Violet focused on Agnes's calm instructions, on Mrs. Patterson's steady hands, on the knowledge that countless women had endured this before her and would endure it after. When the pain seemed unbearable, she thought of her mother, of Caleb, of the life they were fighting to bring into the world. Just before dawn, a baby's cry split the air. Violet collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and overwhelmed, barely registering Agnes's delighted exclamation, "It's a girl! A beautiful, healthy girl!" They placed the baby in her arms, tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be gray-blue, like her father's. Violet stared at her daughter, this small miracle, and felt something crack open in her chest, a love so fierce and immediate it stole her breath. Caleb was allowed in moments later. He stood frozen in the doorway, staring at his wife and child with naked awe. When he finally approached, his hands were trembling as he touched the baby's tiny fist. "She's perfect," he whispered. "You're both perfect. Violet, I can't believe I don't have words." "Neither do I." She smiled up at him through happy tears. "We have a daughter, Caleb. What should we name her?" Violet had thought about this for months, and the answer came easily. "Elizabeth, after my mother. Elizabeth Margaret Irvine. Margaret for my aunt, who supported me when my father wouldn't, if that's all right with you." "It's perfect, Elizabeth." He said the name like a prayer. "Welcome to the world, Elizabeth Irvine. Your mother and I have been waiting for you." Recovery was slow and sometimes painful, but Violet had help. Agnes practically moved into the ranch house for 2 weeks, managing cooking and cleaning while Violet focused on healing and learning to nurse the baby. Sarah Patterson visited regularly with advice and encouragement. Other women from town stopped by with food and offers of assistance, creating a network of support that made the challenging early weeks manageable. Caleb was a devoted father from the start, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Elizabeth when she fussed at night, staring at her with an expression of wonder that never quite faded. Pete and Tommy approached the baby with comical caution, as if she might shatter if they breathed too hard, but their devotion was immediate and absolute. By September, Violet was feeling stronger and beginning to chafe at the inactivity. The new school year had started without her, with a temporary teacher brought in from Laramie. The arrangement was supposed to last the full year, giving Violet time to recover and adjust to motherhood, but she found herself restless and eager to return to teaching. "What if I went back part-time?" she proposed to Caleb one evening as they sat together watching Elizabeth sleep. 3 days a week instead of 5. The temporary teacher could handle the other 2 days, and I'd still be home most of the time with Elizabeth. "Is that what you want? Truly?" "I need teaching, Caleb. I love being Elizabeth's mother, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. But I also need the intellectual stimulation and sense of purpose teaching provides. I'm not whole without it." "Then we'll make it work. Agnes might be willing to watch Elizabeth on your teaching days. Or we could bring the baby to school with us. Plenty of frontier teachers have managed with children present." They settled on a combination approach. On teaching days, Agnes or Sarah would watch Elizabeth, and Violet would rush home during lunch to nurse. On non-teaching days, Violet focused on lesson planning, correspondence with her teacher trainees, and time with her daughter. The schedule was exhausting but sustainable,
and the balance felt right. Returning to the classroom in October was emotional. The students cheered when she arrived, and several crowded around to tell her about the baby they'd heard about but not yet met. The temporary teacher, Miss Andrews, was gracious about the arrangement, admitting she was relieved to have help with the more advanced students. Margaret Hayes had flourished in Violet's absence, helping younger students and effectively serving as Miss Andrews' assistant. "I've been practicing," she told Violet privately. "Trying to learn by teaching others. Is that silly?" "That's exactly how good teachers develop their skills. Margaret, I meant what I said about helping you prepare. When you're 15 or 16, we'll work on getting you enrolled in a teaching program. You have real talent for this." The months that followed were full and rich, sometimes overwhelming, but never empty. Violet juggled teaching, motherhood, and her role as Caleb's partner with varying degrees of success. Some days felt impossible, like she was failing at everything. Other days felt miraculous, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Elizabeth grew from tiny newborn to laughing baby, delighting everyone who encountered her. She had her father's eyes and temperament, calm and observant, studying the world with quiet intensity. Caleb doted on her shamelessly, and Violet frequently found them together in the evenings, Caleb reading aloud from whatever book was handy, while Elizabeth watched his face with rapt attention. "She's going to be a reader," Violet predicted. "Look how she focuses on the pages even though she can't possibly understand the words yet." "Good. She should love books like her mother does. Intelligence and curiosity are gifts we can give her." December brought a surprise visitor. Marcus James arrived in Promise Creek unannounced, traveling from Philadelphia specifically to meet his granddaughter and assess his daughter's life. Violet received the news with mixed feelings, hope that her father had softened, wariness about his potential judgment. He arrived at the ranch on a cold afternoon, looking older than Violet remembered, and out of place in his city clothes. Caleb greeted him with wary courtesy, and Violet met him at the door holding Elizabeth. "Father, this is unexpected." Marcus stared at the baby, his expression unreadable. "She looks like your mother, same eyes, same shape to her face." "Her name is Elizabeth, Elizabeth Margaret. After your mother and aunt." He nodded slowly. "That's fitting." His eyes finally met Violet's. "May I come in, or am I unwelcome here?" "You're welcome." She stepped back, allowing him entry. "Though I'll warn you, if you've come to criticize or condemn, I won't tolerate it. This is my home, and I'm proud of what I've built here." Inside, Marcus looked around the modest but comfortable house with its books and handmade furniture, its warmth and signs of life truly lived. Caleb offered coffee, and they sat awkwardly around the table while Elizabeth dozed in Violet's arms. "I owe you an apology," Marcus said finally. "Multiple apologies, actually. I was cruel in my letters, dismissive of your choices, unwilling to see past my own narrow expectations. Your aunt has been lecturing me for over a year about my blindness, and I finally realized she was right." Violet waited, not making this easy for him. "Your mother would be ashamed of how I treated you. She always said our daughter would do great things, that she had the intelligence and courage to forge her own path. I tried to force you into a mold that didn't fit, and when you broke free, I punished you for it. That was wrong." "Yes, it was," Violet agreed, her voice steady. "You rejected me for choosing a life you didn't approve of, even though it's a good life filled with purpose and love. You couldn't see past your own pride to recognize that I'm happy. I see that now. Violet, this home, it's clearly filled with love. Your husband treats you with respect and partnership. You're teaching, making a difference. You've built exactly the kind of life your mother hoped you'd have. I was a fool not to recognize it sooner." Caleb spoke quietly. "Sir, I can't give your daughter the social status or wealth you might have preferred, but I can promise you I'll spend my life supporting her dreams, respecting her intelligence, and ensuring she never has to choose between her vocation and her family. She's my partner in every sense, and I'm proud of everything she accomplishes." Marcus looked at Caleb for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you, and I'm grateful she found someone who values her properly." He turned back to Violet. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, but I hope, over time, we might rebuild our relationship. I'd like to know my granddaughter, and I'd like her to know that she has a grandfather who, despite his many faults, loves her mother and wants to be part of her life." Violet felt tears prick her eyes. This was the father she remembered from childhood, before grief had hardened him, before her mother's death had broken something inside him. I'd like that too. It won't be easy. There's hurt that needs healing, but for Elizabeth's sake and for Mother's memory, I'm willing to try. Marcus stayed for 3 days, and the visit gradually became less strained. He attended church with them and met the community that had embraced his daughter. He watched Violet teach and saw firsthand the respect and affection her students had for her. He toured the ranch with Caleb and gained appreciation for the hard work and skill required to succeed in this demanding environment. On his last evening, as they sat by the fire with Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Marcus spoke quietly. I understand now why you chose this. It's not what I would have chosen for you, but I see that it's right for you. You're thriving here in ways you never did in Philadelphia. Your mother would be so proud. I hope so. I think about her every day, what she taught me, what she sacrificed to give me opportunities. I'm trying to honor her memory by living fully and helping others the way she helped me. You're succeeding, and Violet, I'm proud too. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of the woman you've become, the teacher you are, the mother you're already proving to be. I'm sorry it took me so long to see clearly. The reconciliation wasn't complete. Too much had passed between them for instant healing, but it was a beginning. When Marcus left to return to Philadelphia, there were tears and embraces, and promises to correspond regularly. Violet stood with Caleb and Elizabeth, watching her father's stage disappear toward Cheyenne, feeling a weight she hadn't fully acknowledged lift from her shoulders. That went better than I expected, Caleb said, his arm around her waist. He's trying. That's all I can ask. Maybe over time we'll fully rebuild what was broken. Elizabeth will help. Grandchildren have a way of softening even the hardest hearts. The new year brought Violet's first teacher training cohort. 3 young women arrived in June, eager and nervous, ready to learn from the experienced teacher they'd heard about. Violet threw herself into their training with the same passion she brought to teaching children, sharing techniques and philosophies, demonstrating lessons, providing honest feedback. The trainees boarded at Agnes's, and the boarding house became an informal center for educational discussions. Evening found them gathered around the common room table, debating teaching methods, sharing concerns, learning from Violet's experiences. Caleb occasionally joined them, offering the perspective of someone who had been failed by poor teaching and transformed by good instruction. Mrs. Irvine saved Pete and Tommy, he told the trainees one evening. Gave them materials and guidance that allowed grown men to learn what they'd been denied as children. Good teaching changes lives at any age. Don't ever forget the power you'll have to shape futures. By August, when the trainees departed for their own teaching assignments, Violet felt confident they would serve their students well. The territorial board was pleased enough to request she train another cohort the following summer. The additional income and expanded influence gratified her, confirmation that her work had value beyond just her own classroom. Elizabeth's first birthday was celebrated with the whole community in attendance. She toddled around on unsteady legs, delighting in the attention, laughing at the antics of older children. Watching her daughter surrounded by people who loved her, Violet felt overwhelmed by gratitude for this life she had stumbled into. A year ago, I couldn't imagine this, she told Caleb as they watched Elizabeth destroy a small cake with enthusiastic hands. How full and rich our life would be. 2 years ago, I couldn't imagine any of it. Then you showed up, sleeping beside your luggage, looking completely out of place and absolutely determined. I knew that night that everything was about to change. Did you really? Know that you'd marry me? Not exactly, but I knew you were significant, that finding you wasn't random chance. I'm not a religious man in conventional ways, but that night felt like providence, like I was supposed to be on that road at that exact moment to find you. She leaned against him, watching their daughter laugh with chocolate-covered hands. I used to be so afraid of love, of losing myself in someone else's expectations. But this, us, it's made me more myself, not less. You've given me space to be everything I am. That's what love should do. Enhance, not diminish. Your mother understood that, and she raised you to expect nothing less. I'm just grateful you found me worthy of what she taught you to demand. The seasons cycled forward, each bringing its challenges and joys. Violet continued teaching, training new educators each summer, raising Elizabeth with Caleb's devoted partnership. Margaret Hayes, now 16, began preparing seriously for teacher training, spending hours with Violet learning advanced techniques. The lending library expanded to over 300 volumes, becoming a genuine community resource. In the spring of 1879, 3 years after Violet's arrival in Promise Creek, the town held a ceremony honoring her contributions. The school board presented her with a plaque recognizing her as Wyoming Territory's most effective rural teacher, noting that her students consistently outperformed expectations and that the teachers she trained were spreading excellence across the region. Mrs. Irvine arrived here as a stranger, Reverend Collins said during his speech, abandoned on a dark road, frightened and alone. But she refused to let that difficult beginning define her future. She built a life of purpose and service, teaching our children, training new teachers, proving that education can flourish even in harsh environments. We are blessed to have her, and we honor her dedication. The applause was thunderous. Students past and present stood to acknowledge her. Parents wiped away tears. Caleb stood in the back with Elizabeth on his shoulders, his pride evident to everyone. That evening, back at the ranch, Violet hung the plaque on the wall beside her desk. It was a tangible reminder of what she had accomplished, validation of the choice she had made to come west and build something meaningful. Your mother would frame that and show it to everyone, Caleb teased gently. She would. And she'd tell everyone about how her daughter defied expectations and succeeded anyway. Violet touched the plaque lightly. I wish she could have seen this, known that her investment in my education paid off exactly as she hoped it would. She knows. Somehow, somewhere, she knows. Elizabeth, now a toddler with strong opinions and her father's calm temperament, tugged at Violet's skirt. Mama, book? Yes, sweetheart. Let's read a book. Violet scooped up her daughter and settled into the rocking chair Caleb had built. Elizabeth snuggled close as Violet opened a familiar picture book and began reading. Caleb watched them from the doorway, his expression soft with contentment. This was what he had hoped for when he had carried a sleeping stranger into his wagon that October night. Not this specifically, because he couldn't have imagined Violet or Elizabeth or the life they'd built together, but this feeling, this sense of home and purpose and love that made every hardship worthwhile. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of challenges and triumphs. Elizabeth grew into a bright, curious child who loved books as much as her mother and horses as much as her father. Violet's reputation as an educator spread beyond Wyoming Territory, and she received offers to move to larger communities, to train teachers at established institutions. She declined them all. Promise Creek was home, and the work here, teaching frontier children who might otherwise receive no education, felt more important than prestige or advancement. Margaret Hayes became Wyoming's youngest certified teacher at 17, moving to a small community 50 miles away to start her own school. She corresponded regularly with Violet, seeking advice and sharing triumphs. You showed me what was possible, she wrote in one letter. You proved that women can have both, meaningful work and full lives. I'm trying to follow your example. Violet's father visited twice more before his death in 1882. The relationship never fully healed but made peace with. He held Elizabeth on his knee and told her stories about her grandmother, ensuring that Elizabeth James's legacy was passed to the next generation. When news of his death reached Wyoming, Violet grieved not for the father he had been in her final Philadelphia years, but for the father she remembered from childhood, the man who had briefly reappeared before it was too late. More children came. A son named Thomas in 1880, twin girls in 1883. The ranch house expanded to accommodate them, and Violet's teaching schedule adapted to the demands of a growing family. She never stopped working entirely, though there were seasons when her classroom time was limited to 2 days a week. The community remained flexible, understanding that they were lucky to have her at all, in whatever capacity she could manage. Caleb remained her unwavering partner through all of it. He never complained about her divided attention, never suggested she should sacrifice her teaching for purely domestic focus. Instead, he adjusted ranch operations to support her work, hired help when needed, and shared childcare duties with an equality rare for the time. How did you know? Violet asked him one evening as they sat on their porch, years married now, watching their children play in the yard.
That night when you found me, how did you know I'd fit into your life? I didn't know. I just knew you were worth the risk. You looked small and frightened, but determined, like you'd chosen a hard path and were committed to seeing it through. That kind of courage is rare. I wanted to know more about the woman who had it. And now? Now I know I was right to take that chance. You've made everything better, the ranch, the community, my life. Our children will grow up with a mother who shows them that purpose and family aren't mutually exclusive, that women can be intelligent and independent while also being loving and committed. That's a gift beyond measure. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together in the gesture that had become their signature. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Your support, your respect for my work, it's made everything possible. We've built it together. That's what partnership means. The sun set in familiar glory, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of amber and rose. Their children's laughter filled the evening air. The ranch, their ranch, spread out around them, solid and prosperous. Inside the house, shelves held hundreds of books beside family photographs and children's drawings. The desk by the window was covered with lesson plans and correspondence with teachers scattered across the West. This was the life Violet had found when a cowboy lifted her gently from beside her luggage on a dark October night. She had been lost and frightened, convinced she had made a terrible mistake in coming west. Instead, she had found everything she needed: purpose and love, challenge and support, a community that valued what she offered, and a partner who enhanced rather than restricted her possibilities. The girl who had slept beside her luggage had been transformed into a woman who knew her own strength and value, who had built something meaningful with her life, who had found love without surrendering identity. The cowboy who had stopped his wagon had been transformed too, from a lonely rancher going through motions into a husband and father whose life had depth and richness he had never imagined possible. Together, they had created not just a marriage but a model, proof that partnership could be equal, that women could have both vocation and family, that love properly given expanded rather than confined. Their children would grow up understanding that people were not limited by gender or convention, that with courage and support, any life was possible. As darkness fell and stars emerged in their countless billions, Violet thought of that first night under these same stars, when everything had been uncertain and frightening. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the losses and fears, the difficult choices and acts of courage. She thought of all the people who had shaped this life, her mother who had planted seeds of independence, Caleb who had nurtured them, Agnes and Sarah and countless others who had supported and sustained her. Most of all, she thought of the sleeping girl beside her luggage, waiting unknowingly for rescue, having no idea that the approaching wagon carried not just safety, but destiny. That girl had been brave enough to come west, determined enough to survive, open enough to accept unexpected love. She deserved honor and gratitude. "Thank you," Violet whispered to that younger self across the years. "Thank you for being brave. Thank you for saying yes to the unknown. Look what we built because you refused to give up." Caleb squeezed her hand and she turned to him with a smile that held everything: love, gratitude, contentment, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. The cowboy and the teacher, the rancher and the educator, the husband and wife who had found each other in darkness and built something luminous together. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and eternal, bearing witness to one small love story in one corner of Wyoming territory. A story that began with a woman sleeping beside her luggage and a man gentle enough to lift her carefully into his wagon, brave enough to offer her his heart, wise enough to let her keep her own. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irvine," he had said that first night. Welcome home, she thought now, and meant it with all the complexity and richness the words had accumulated. This was home, not a place of surrender, but of belonging, not a cage, but a foundation, not the end of her story, but the best possible beginning. The stars shone on, blessing them with their silent light, and the story that had started on a dark road continued into a future bright with love and purpose, partnership and possibility. All the days of their lives stretching forward like the vast Wyoming landscape, beautiful, challenging, honest, and unmistakably home.